There are moments in life when the past and future collide, not in grand prophetic visions that announce themselves with thunder and lightning, but in quiet instances when fate slips in through the back door of your ordinary existence, taps you on the shoulder, and whispers that nothing will ever be the same again. For Sarah Mackenzie, that moment came on a misty September evening beside the dark waters of Loch Lomond, where a child's desperate cry shattered the silence and set her on a path she could never have imagined. The Scottish Highlands had always called to Sarah. Even during her 20 years in Boston, working as an emergency room nurse, she had felt the pull of this ancient land in her blood. It was in the way she found herself pausing whenever Celtic music played on the radio, in how the scent of peat and heather in specialty shops would stop her in her tracks, eyes closed, breathing deeply as if trying to inhale a memory just beyond her grasp. But it took losing Michael to cancer after 19 years of marriage to finally answer that call. At 45, widowed and untethered, Sarah had packed up her life into 2 suitcases and returned to the land her grandmother had left nearly 70 years before. The cottage she rented in the village of Bella sat at the edge of the forest, its stone walls weathered by centuries of highland storms. Inside, the rooms were small but welcoming, with exposed beams crossing low ceilings and windows that looked out over the loch and the mountains beyond. It was nothing like the modern apartment in Boston she had shared with Michael, with its sleek lines and stainless steel appliances. This place felt like stepping back in time. Perhaps that was what she needed, a new beginning that somehow felt like coming home. On her third day in the cottage, while searching for extra blankets against the autumn chill, Sarah discovered an old trunk in the attic. Inside, beneath layers of musty fabric and forgotten trinkets, she found a leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed with age, the handwriting faded but still legible. It had belonged to her grandmother, Margaret Mackenzie. Sarah settled onto the dusty attic floor, Bob Dylan's Tangled Up in Blue, playing softly from her phone, and began to read. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The journal contained stories of creatures that walked as men by day, but transformed beneath the Highland moon. Tales of ancient feuds and forbidden love. Accounts of seers who could glimpse the future in reflections on the loch waters. Sarah's hands trembled as she read her grandmother's words. The Fraser clan keeps the old ways in the high castle. They are the guardians of the threshold between worlds. Their eyes burn like amber fire when the moon is full, and their loyalty is as fierce as their rage. The Mackenzie women have always known their secrets. We have always been the bridge. Sarah closed the journal and pressed it to her chest. Her grandmother had been known for her vivid imagination and Scottish folklore tales. Surely these were just stories meant to entertain, to keep the old traditions alive across the ocean. Yet something about the specificity, the urgency in her grandmother's handwriting, felt too real to dismiss. That night, Sarah dreamed of wolves running through moonlit forests, their howls echoing across the centuries. She woke with tears on her cheeks, feeling a loss she couldn't name. The days passed in a gentle rhythm as Sarah settled into village life. The locals were reserved but kind, their Scottish accents rolling over her American ears like music. She spent her mornings exploring the village and surrounding countryside, afternoons reading or writing in her own journal, and evenings by the fireplace with a glass of whiskey, listening to the albums that had been the soundtrack to her youth. Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, Big Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, The Eagles' Hotel California. Music that had been playing on the radio when she was just a girl, dreaming of adventures far beyond her suburban Massachusetts home. It was on a Tuesday evening in late September when Sarah found herself drawn to the loch. The day had been unseasonably warm, the late afternoon sun turning the water to molten gold. She brought her journal and a thermos of tea, settling onto a large flat stone near the shore. The mountains reflected perfectly on the water's surface, creating the illusion of an infinite landscape extending both above and below. Sarah breathed deeply, feeling more at peace than she had in years, since before Michael's diagnosis, before the endless rounds of treatment, before the slow, painful farewell that consumed the final year of their marriage. She opened her journal and began to write about Michael, about the hollowness that still ached in her chest, about the strange sense of rightness she felt in this foreign yet familiar place. The words flowed easily, her pen moving across the page as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. She was so absorbed in her writing that at first she didn't hear it. The sound registered at the edge of her consciousness like a distant bird call. But then it came again. A high, frightened cry that cut through the evening stillness. A child's voice coming from the water. Sarah's head snapped up, eyes scanning the loch. The golden light had faded to deep blue shadows, making it difficult to see. But there, about 30 yards out, something was splashing frantically in the water. Without hesitation, Sarah dropped her journal and kicked off her shoes. 20 years in emergency medicine had conditioned her to move toward danger rather than away from it. She waded into the loch, gasping as the icy water climbed up her legs, soaking her jeans and sending shivers through her body. When the water reached her waist, she began to swim, powerful strokes carrying her toward the splashing. As she drew closer, she could make out the figure of a small boy, no more than 5 or 6 years old. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, his small arms flailing desperately as he struggled to keep his head above water. "Hold on," Sarah called, her nurse's training keeping her voice calm, despite the urgency coursing through her veins. "I'm coming. Try to float on your back." But the child was too panicked to follow instructions, his movements becoming weaker as exhaustion and cold set in. Sarah reached him just as he began to slip beneath the surface. Her hand closed around his arm, pulling him back up into the air. He coughed and sputtered, water streaming from his mouth and nose, eyes wide with terror. "I've got you," she said, hooking her arm across his chest in the rescue position she'd practiced countless times. "Just breathe. That's right, just breathe with me." The boy trembled violently in her grasp as she began to swim backward toward the shore, one arm keeping his head above water, the other cutting through the loch with determined strokes. The return journey seemed to take forever, the cold seeping into Sarah's bones, her clothes dragging heavily, the small body in her arms a precious burden. Finally, her feet touched the bottom and she stood, lifting the boy against her chest as she waited the final distance to shore. They collapsed together onto the rocky beach, both gasping for breath. Sarah quickly checked the child's vital signs. His pulse was rapid but strong, his breathing labored but improving. No signs of secondary drowning yet, but she would need to monitor him closely. As her medical training took over, something extraordinary happened. When she placed her hand on the boy's chest to feel his heartbeat, a jolt of energy passed between them, like static electricity, but warmer, deeper. Suddenly, she wasn't on the shore anymore. She was seeing flashes of images. A grand castle on a hillside, a magnificent great hall with tapestries and a roaring fire. A tall, imposing man with penetrating eyes. A woman's gentle hands braiding the boy's hair. A forest viewed from above, as if running through the treetops at impossible speed. The sensations were overwhelming, confusing, terrifying in their intensity and impossible reality. Sarah jerked her hand away, blinking in confusion. The boy was looking up at her with eyes the color of burnished gold, an unnatural shade that seemed to glow even in the fading light. "You saved me," he whispered, his Scottish accent thick but understandable. "Father said humans never come to this part of the loch." Before Sarah could process the strange choice of words, a deep voice called out from further up the shore. "Callum, Callum, answer me." A tall figure was moving rapidly toward them, silhouetted against the twilight sky. As he drew closer, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The man was striking in a way that transcended conventional handsomeness. His features were sharp and aristocratic, framed by dark hair that fell to his shoulders. He wore a simple black sweater and jeans, but moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. And his eyes. Even in the dimming light, Sarah could see they were the exact same unnatural gold as the boy's. "Father?" the child called out, his voice stronger now. "She pulled me from the water. I was drowning and she saved me." The man reached them and dropped to his knees beside his son, large hands moving over the boy's face and body, checking for injuries. The relief on his face was palpable, his features softening for a moment before hardening again as he turned to Sarah. "You risked your life for my son." It wasn't a question but a statement, his voice deep and resonant with an accent that spoke of centuries rather than decades in the Highlands. "Anyone would have done the same," Sarah said, suddenly conscious of her dripping clothes and disheveled appearance. The man's golden gaze held hers for a long moment. "No, they would not." He stood and extended his hand to help her up. "I am Connell Fraser, This is my son, Callum, and you have placed me deeply in your debt, Miss Mackenzie, Sarah Mackenzie. She placed her hand in his, and the world tilted on its axis. The contact sent a shockwave through her system, more powerful than what she had experienced with the boy. Images flooded her mind. A younger Connell in clothes from another century, leading men into battle. The same man running through forest on all fours, his body blurring and changing in impossible ways. Connell holding a newborn Callum, while a woman with copper hair smiled weakly from a bed, blood staining the sheets beneath her. Connell standing on castle ramparts, his face lifted to a full moon, grief etched into every line of his face. And through it all, a sense of immense age, of power barely contained beneath human skin, of a loneliness so vast it seemed to span centuries. Sarah gasped and tried to pull her hand away, but Connell held firm, his eyes widening in shock. "You saw," he whispered, his voice a mixture of wonder and alarm. "You saw me." Before Sarah could respond, Callum began to cough violently, his small body shaking with the effort. The moment broken, Sarah immediately shifted back into nurse mode. "He needs dry clothes and warmth," she said, "and he should be checked for secondary drowning. It can develop hours after a near-drowning incident." Connell nodded, lifting his son effortlessly into his arms. "My home is not far. Please come with us. You need dry clothes as well, and I owe you far more than simple hospitality for what you've done tonight." There was something in his tone that brooked no argument, a natural authority that Sarah found herself responding to despite her confusion. "My car is in the village," she began, but Connell shook his head. "I have a vehicle just beyond the trees. I'll have someone retrieve your belongings later." His gaze softened slightly. "Please, Miss Mackenzie, allow me to repay a fraction of the debt I owe you." Sarah hesitated, every logical part of her mind screaming that going anywhere with this strange man was foolish, potentially dangerous. But something deeper, more instinctive, told her that this encounter was meant to be, that the path forward, however uncertain, lay with Connell Fraser and his golden-eyed son. Perhaps it was the nurse in her, unwilling to leave a patient until she was certain of his recovery. Perhaps it was the visions she couldn't explain, the connection she had felt to both father and son. Or perhaps it was simply the pull of destiny, invisible but inexorable, drawing her toward a truth she had always somehow known was waiting. "All right," she said finally. "Lead the way, Mr. Fraser." The vehicle turned out to be a Land Rover Defender, mud-splattered and well-used, parked in a small clearing beyond the tree line. Connell settled Callum in the back seat, wrapping him in a plaid wool blanket he retrieved from the trunk. "There are blankets for you as well," he said to Sarah, his tone gentler now. "The heater works remarkably well." As they drove through the gathering darkness, Sarah tried to make sense of what had happened. The visions when she touched Callum and Connell defied rational explanation. Could it be some form of hallucination brought on by the cold and adrenaline? A weird neurological response to nearly drowning herself? The alternative was too fantastic to consider. That she had somehow seen actual memories, fragments of these strangers' lives flickering through her mind like scenes from a movie. "You're thinking very loudly," Connell said, his eyes fixed on the narrow road winding through the forest. "I can practically hear the wheels turning." Sarah wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "It's been an unusual evening." Indeed, a ghost of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "But perhaps not as unusual as you might think, Sarah Mackenzie. Your name, it's of this land." "My grandmother was Scottish, Margaret Mackenzie. She emigrated to America as a young woman, just after World War II. Connell's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Margaret Mackenzie," he repeated softly. "From Bella Village?" Sarah turned to look at him, surprised. "Yes, how did you know?" "The Highlands may seem vast to outsiders, but to those who have dwelled here for generations, it's a small place indeed." He glanced at her briefly, those unusual eyes reflecting the dashboard lights. "The Mackenzie women have a certain reputation in these parts." The words sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. They echoed the passage from her grandmother's journal too closely to be coincidence. "What kind of reputation?" Connell didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the Land Rover onto a gravel drive that Sarah hadn't even noticed in the darkness. Ancient oak trees lined the path, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. We're nearly there, he said. Fraser Castle has stood on this land for over 500 years. It's withstood English sieges, Highland clearances, and the relentless march of modernity. It will shelter you safely tonight. As they emerged from the trees, Sarah gasped. Silhouetted against the night sky was a castle straight out of medieval times. Towering stone walls, a central keep with turrets at each corner, and windows glowing with warm light against the darkness. It wasn't a ruin or a museum piece, but a living, breathing home that somehow existed outside of time, just like the man sitting beside her. "Welcome to my home," Connell said, a note of pride in his deep voice. "One of the few places left in Scotland where the old ways are still honored, where the veil between worlds remains thin enough to part." Callum stirred in the back seat. "Father, is she the one? Is she like in the stories?" "Hush, Momhack," Connell replied softly. "Rest now. We'll speak of such things later." They parked in a courtyard and Connell carried his son inside, gesturing for Sarah to follow. The great oak door opened before they reached it, revealing a tall, slender woman with striking auburn hair pulled back in a severe braid. Her face was beautiful but cold, with high cheekbones and the same unusual golden eyes as Connell and Callum. She wore a simple black dress that somehow managed to look both modern and timeless. "Brother," she said, her voice melodic but sharp. "The boy, he's well, thanks to Ms. Mackenzie," Connell replied, brushing past her. "Have Morgana prepare the blue room for our guest, and find some suitable clothes for her." The woman's gaze shifted to Sarah, and the intensity of her stare was almost physical. "A Mackenzie," she said, the words sounding like both recognition and accusation. "How providential." "This is my sister Rona," Connell said over his shoulder, already heading toward a grand staircase. "She lacks manners but makes up for it with fierce loyalty. Don't let her intimidate you." "A pleasure to meet you," Sarah said automatically, medical training kicking in again. "Your nephew should be monitored closely tonight. Near drowning can lead to complications hours after the incident." Rona's expression softened fractionally. "You're a healer." "A nurse," Sarah corrected. "Emergency medicine." "Follow me," Connell called from the stairs. "Rona, send Duncan to retrieve Miss Mackenzie's belongings from the loch shore, and have the kitchen prepare something warm." The interior of the castle was a fascinating blend of ancient and modern. Stone walls hung with tapestries and clan tartans, but electric lights in antique fixtures. Wooden floors covered with Persian rugs. A massive fireplace with a plasma television mounted above it. They passed through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women, all bearing a family resemblance to Connell, all with those same unusual golden eyes. Callum was taken to his bedroom, where Sarah helped settle him in and checked his vital signs again. The boy's recovery seemed almost miraculous. His color good, breathing normal, no signs of the trauma he'd so recently experienced. As she tucked the blankets around him, he caught her hand. "Thank you for saving me," he whispered. "Father says life debts are sacred. That means you're part of us now." Before Sarah could respond, an elderly woman entered the room carrying a tray with what looked like herbal tea. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair twisted into an elaborate knot at the nape of her neck. Unlike the others, her eyes were a pale, icy blue that seemed to look through rather than at Sarah. "So this is our water witch," the old woman said, her voice surprisingly strong and clear. "I am Morgana, keeper of the Fraser histories and healer to the clan. You've had quite the introduction to our world, Sarah Mackenzie." "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time," Sarah said, uncomfortable with the way everyone seemed to know her name to have been expecting her. Morgana's thin lips curved into a knowing smile. "There are no accidents in the Highlands, child. Only fate unwinding as it must." She placed the tray on the bedside table and poured a cup of the steaming liquid. "For the young lord, an old remedy to ward off the water's ill effects." Callum wrinkled his nose, but obediently took the cup when his father nodded. The smell that wafted from it was unfamiliar to Sarah, herbal but with an underlying muskiness that was almost animal. "What's in that?" she asked, professional concern overriding politeness. "Herbs that have served the clan for centuries," Morgana replied smoothly. "Heather for healing, rowan for protection, wolfsbane for strength." "Wolfsbane is toxic," Sarah said sharply. "Extremely toxic. It can cause cardiac arrhythmias, hypotension, Not to us, Connell interrupted quietly. Our constitution is somewhat different from what you might be accustomed to in your medical practice. There was something in the way he emphasized us and our that sent another chill through Sarah. The golden eyes, the references to old ways and thin veils, the impossible visions when she touched them. Her grandmother's journal describing creatures that walked as men by day. All of it was converging toward a conclusion so fantastic that her rational mind rebelled against it. Callum drank the tea without further complaint and settled back against his pillows, eyelids already drooping. Will you still be here when I wake up? He asked Sarah, voice slurring slightly with approaching sleep. I'll check on you, she promised, unable to resist smoothing his dark hair back from his forehead. The gesture felt surprisingly natural, as if she'd done it 100 times before. Connell waited until his son was asleep before gesturing Sarah to follow him out into the hallway. Come, you need dry clothes and food. Then we have much to discuss. The blue room turned out to be a spacious bedroom dominated by a four-poster bed with midnight blue velvet hangings. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and modern amenities like an ensuite bathroom and subtle electric lighting made it clear that despite its medieval appearance, Fraser Castle embraced certain aspects of the 21st century. Laid out on the bed was an assortment of women's clothing that looked approximately her size. My sister's, Connell explained. She's taller than you, but these should suffice until your own things are returned. He hesitated at the door. Take your time. When you're ready, come down to the Great Hall, first door on the right at the bottom of the stairs. Left alone, Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the evening finally catching up with her. She had nearly drowned trying to save a child. She'd experienced impossible visions. She was now in a medieval castle with a family who all had golden eyes and spoke in riddles. It was too much to process, her mind spinning with questions that had no rational answers. After a hot shower that eased some of the chill from her bones, Sarah dressed in the borrowed clothes. Simple black leggings and an oversized cable knit sweater in deep forest green. Both were made of materials finer than anything in her own wardrobe, the wool so soft it felt like cashmere. As she towel-dried her auburn hair, Sarah caught sight of herself in the antique mirror above the dresser. At 45, she was still attractive in a quiet way. Laugh lines at the corners of her green eyes and silver threading through her hair were the only real signs of age. Michael had always said she had an old soul and a face that refused to acknowledge time's passage. Michael. What would he think of this situation? Her practical, science-minded husband, who had approached his cancer diagnosis with the same methodical problem-solving he'd applied to his engineering career. He would tell her to find logical explanations, to trust her training and experience over folklore and mysterious coincidences. But he would also tell her to follow her instincts, those same instincts that had made her an exceptional nurse, able to sense when a patient was about to crash before the monitor showed any change. And her instincts were telling her that there was something extraordinary about the Fraser family, something that defied medical science and modern rationality, something she needed to understand. The Great Hall was exactly as she had glimpsed in her vision when touching Callum, a vast space with a vaulted ceiling, massive stone fireplace, and walls adorned with tapestries, weapons, and the mounted heads of stags. A long table dominated the center of the room, with high-backed chairs that looked like thrones. But instead of being seated there, she found Connell in a more intimate setting near the fire, a grouping of leather armchairs and a low table set with food and drink. He rose when she entered, those strange eyes taking in her appearance with approval. Better, he said simply. Please join me, you must be hungry. Sarah approached cautiously, taking the chair opposite his. On the table between them was a spread that would have been at home in any high-end restaurant. Crusty bread, a selection of cheeses, cold meats, and fruit. A bottle of red wine stood open beside two crystal glasses. This is very kind, she said, realizing suddenly that she was indeed ravenous. But I can't help feeling there's more happening here than simple hospitality. Connell's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Direct, good. I've no patience for dancing around truths that need to be spoken. He poured wine into both glasses and handed one to her. You experienced something at the lock when you touched my son, and again when you touched me, something that frightened and confused you. Sarah took a sip of wine to steady herself. It was rich and complex, clearly expensive. I had some sort of hallucination, probably from the cold and stress. No, the single word was spoken with absolute certainty. You saw fragments of our lives, moments from our past, perhaps even glimpses of what might come. He leaned forward, the firelight casting dramatic shadows across his aristocratic features. The Mackenzie women have always had the sight. It's in your blood, just as certain. Qualities are in mine. Sarah set her glass down carefully. You're talking about something impossible. Am I? You felt it, saw it, experienced it directly. Connell's voice remained calm, reasonable. Your grandmother, Margaret Mackenzie, she left these lands abruptly in 1946. Do you know why? The question caught Sarah off guard. She met my grandfather, an American soldier stationed here after the war. That is the story she told, yes. Connell rose and moved to stand before the fire, his tall figure silhouetted against the flames. The truth is more complicated. Margaret had the sight stronger than any Mackenzie in generations. She saw things the clan wished to remain hidden, and when she began to ask questions, to probe secrets best left buried, it was decided she would be safer across the ocean. Sarah frowned. Are you saying she was forced to leave? Not forced, protected. Connell turned back to face her. Your grandmother was young, headstrong. She had discovered the nature of the Fraser clan and was fascinated rather than frightened. She began spending time at the castle, learning our ways, documenting our history. It was a dangerous time to draw attention to those who were different. Different how? Sarah asked, though a part of her already knew the answer, had known it since she first looked into those inhuman golden eyes. Connell held her gaze steadily. You've read her journal. You've seen with your own eyes and felt with your own gifts. Tell me what we are, Sarah Mackenzie. The fire crackled in the silence that followed his challenge. Outside, the wind had picked up, moaning around the ancient stone walls like a living thing. Sarah thought of her grandmother's writings, of the flashes she'd seen when touching Callum and Connell, of golden eyes that glowed in the darkness, of a boy who recovered from near drowning with miraculous speed, of a man who moved with predatory grace and spoke of centuries as if he had witnessed them personally. Werewolves, she whispered, the word feeling both ridiculous and absolutely right on her tongue. You're werewolves. Instead of laughing or denying it, Connell simply nodded. We prefer the term wolf-kind or shifting folk, but the concept is essentially correct. He returned to his chair, movements fluid and controlled. My family has led the Highland Pack for over 1,000 years. We were here before the Romans, before Christianity. We have watched empires rise and fall, borders shift, languages transform. Through it all, we have endured, adapting when necessary, withdrawing when prudent, but always maintaining our true nature. Sarah's mind raced, trying to reconcile this impossible revelation with her scientific understanding of the world. That's not possible. The biological transformations required, the energy expenditure, the violation of conservation of mass. A low chuckle rumbled from Connell's chest. Always the healer, analyzing and categorizing. Not all mysteries of this world have been cataloged by your science, Sarah. There are older magics, deeper truths. Your own ability to see beyond the veil of the present moment defies your medical textbooks, does it not? He had her there. What she had experienced when touching them couldn't be explained by any medical or scientific framework she knew. So all of you, Callum, Rona, the old woman Morgana, all Fraser blood carries the gift, though Morgana is, something else entirely. Not wolf, but equally ancient, a keeper of mysteries and knowledge that predates even my line. Connell took a drink of his wine, watching her over the rim of his glass. You're taking this remarkably well. I'm probably in shock, Sarah admitted. Or maybe I've hit my head and this is all an elaborate coma dream. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. There was a rightness to this revelation, as if she had always known such things existed just beyond the periphery of ordinary life, as if she had been waiting her entire life to have the veil lifted from her eyes. There's more, Connell said, his tone growing serious again. The fact that you have manifested the sight now at this particular moment in time, when my son's life was at stake, it cannot be coincidence. What do you mean? Connell sighed, suddenly looking every bit his true age, whatever that might be. Centuries of worry seemed to line his face in the firelight. There is an old prophecy among our kind, a curse laid upon the Fraser line 300 years ago by a powerful enemy. It states that the last pure-blooded alpha of our line will find his true mate in a daughter of the seer bloodline, that their union will either save our kind from extinction or hasten our final end. Sarah stared at him, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. And you think I'm this mate because I saved your son? Because I saw some visions when I touched you? She shook her head firmly. I'm 45 years old, Mr. Fraser. I've had my great love story already. I buried my husband less than a year ago. I'm not interested in being part of some supernatural prophecy. The timing is rarely convenient for such things, Connell replied, unmoved by her objections. And age means little to my kind. I am over 500 years old, though I appear to be in my fifth decade. If you are indeed the one foretold, the connection between us will make itself known regardless of our wishes or circumstances. Before Sarah could respond, the great hall doors swung open, and a powerfully built older man entered. He had the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors, with a thick beard shot through with gray and the same golden eyes as the others. He moved with military precision despite his apparent age, back straight, shoulders square. "The boy?" he asked without preamble. "Sleeping peacefully, thanks to our guest," Connell replied. "Sarah, this is Duncan, my head of security and oldest friend. Duncan, Sarah Mackenzie." Duncan's bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Mackenzie? Margaret's girl?" "Granddaughter," Sarah corrected automatically. "The resemblance is clear now that you mention it," Duncan said, studying her face. "Same eyes, same stubborn set to the jaw." There was something like wistfulness in his gruff voice. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." "Did you know her?" Sarah asked, surprised. Duncan exchanged a quick glance with Connell. I knew her well." Without elaborating, he turned back to his leader. "Your sister's in quite a state about our guest, and Morgana's been muttering prophecies since the moment this one crossed the threshold." "Let them mutter," Connell said dismissively. "Sarah saved my son's life. She has earned our hospitality and protection, regardless of what may or may not come to pass." Duncan nodded sharply. "I've sent men to retrieve her things from the lock. They'll bring her car around as well." He looked back at Sarah. "Unless you're planning to leave us so soon?" There was a challenge in the question. Despite her rational mind screaming that she should run as far and fast from this impossible situation as possible, Sarah found herself reluctant to leave. The mystery of her grandmother's past, the nature of her own strange abilities, the prophecy Connell had mentioned all tugged at her with undeniable force. And beneath it all was a pull toward Connell himself that she couldn't explain or deny, something primal and ancient that seemed to resonate between them like the lowest note on a bass string, felt rather than heard. "I'd like to check on Callum in the morning," she said finally. "Make sure there are no delayed effects from his near drowning." "Of course," Connell agreed smoothly. "Duncan, see that Ms. Mackenzie's cottage is secured and her mail collected. She'll be staying with us for the time being." The casual assumption that she would simply upend her life to accommodate their supernatural drama irritated Sarah. "I haven't agreed to anything beyond tonight, Mr. Fraser." Connell's golden eyes held a hint of amusement. "You saved a wolf cub from drowning, revealed yourself as a seer of the Mackenzie line, and walked willingly into the ancestral home of the Fraser pack. I'd say you've already agreed to far more than you realize, Sarah." As if to punctuate his words, a distant howl echoed from the forest beyond the castle walls. It was answered by another, then another, until a chorus of wolves seemed to be singing to the night sky. Except there had been no wolves in Scotland for hundreds of years. Sarah shivered despite the warmth of the fire. Whatever path she had stepped onto beside Loch Lomond this evening, there would be no easy return to the life she had known before. Connell raised his wine glass in a silent toast, his expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. "Welcome back to the Highlands, Sarah Mackenzie. Welcome home." That night, Sarah dreamed of running through moonlit forests on four paws, the scent of pine and heather sharp in her sensitive nose, the taste of freedom wild on her tongue. She dreamed of standing beside Connell on castle ramparts, watching as their children played in the courtyard below, their laughter rising like music to the star-filled sky. She dreamed of an old woman with Margaret Mackenzie's face placing a pendant around her neck, whispering, "Remember who you are when the darkness comes." She woke at dawn, the pendant dream so vivid that her hand went automatically to her throat, expecting to find something there. The room was bathed in soft golden light, filtering through heavy curtains, giving everything a dreamlike quality. For a moment, Sarah wondered if the events of the previous evening had been a dream as well. Then she noticed the clothes laid out for her weren't her own, and the reality of her situation came flooding back. Sarah dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes from the previous night and made her way to Callum's room. The castle was quiet in the early morning light, the ancient stone walls holding the silence of centuries. She half expected to find guards or servants, but the corridors were empty, the only sound her own footsteps on the flagstone floors. Callum's bedroom door was ajar. Sarah knocked softly before pushing it open. The boy was still asleep, his dark hair tousled against the pillow, face peaceful in repose. Sitting in a chair beside the bed, head bowed in what appeared to be slumber, was Morgana. The old woman's eyes snapped open the moment Sarah entered, those pale blue orbs fixing on her with unnerving intensity. "The seer returns," Morgana murmured, her thin lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Come to check on our young prince?" Sarah approached the bed, medical training taking precedence over supernatural concerns. She placed a gentle hand on Callum's forehead, relieved to find his skin cool and dry. His breathing was deep and regular, pulse strong and steady when she checked his wrist. No signs of pulmonary edema or other complications from his near drowning. "He's recovering remarkably well," she said, professional satisfaction in her tone. "Children are resilient, but this is exceptional even by those standards." "We heal differently," Morgana replied, rising from her chair with fluid grace that belied her apparent age. "Faster, more completely, it is one of the gifts of the blood." Sarah straightened, facing the old woman directly. "You're not one of them, are you? Not a wolf?" Morgana's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too white in her aged face. "Very perceptive. No, I am not of the wolf kind. My lineage is elsewhere." She moved to the window, drawing back heavy curtains to admit more of the morning light. "Like you, I serve a purpose within the pack structure. I keep their histories, tend their wounds, guard their secrets." "And what is my purpose supposed to be?" Sarah asked, unable to keep a note of challenge from her voice. Morgana turned, the sunlight behind her creating an almost halo-like effect around her silver hair. "That remains to be seen, doesn't it? The prodigal seer returned at last to the land of her ancestors, the circle completing after generations." She approached Sarah, moving with that uncanny grace. "Your grandmother fled from destiny. Will you do the same, I wonder?" "My grandmother made a life for herself in America, a good life with a husband she loved and children she adored." Sarah stood her ground as the old woman circled her, feeling like prey being assessed by a predator. "I wouldn't call that fleeing. Wouldn't you?" Morgana's voice was soft, almost hypnotic. She knew what she was, knew her power and her place in the great pattern. Yet she turned her back on it all for the love of a mortal man with a mortal lifespan. She stopped directly in front of Sarah, close enough that the scent of herbs and something older, earthier, filled the air between them. "And now here you are, widow woman, the sight awakening in your blood just when the pack needs it most." Just when Callum Fraser, heir to the Alpha bloodline, finds himself drowning in the very waters where prophecy says salvation will be born. A soft voice from the bed interrupted whatever Sarah might have replied. "Are you talking about me?" Callum was sitting up, rubbing sleep from his golden eyes. He looked completely recovered, his color healthy, movement strong and sure as he pushed back the blankets. "Father says it's rude to talk about people when they're in the room, even if they're sleeping." Morgana's demeanor changed instantly, the intensity replaced by grandmotherly affection. "Good morning, young lord. How do you feel after your adventure?" "Hungry," Callum replied with the straightforwardness of children everywhere. His gaze shifted to Sarah, brightening. "You stayed. Father said you might." Sarah moved to the bedside, automatically checking his eyes for pupil response. "Of course I stayed. I needed to make sure you were all right." "I'm fine." the boy assured her, submitting to her examination with the patience of someone accustomed to medical attention. Wolfkind don't get sick like humans do. Father says it's because our blood remembers the old magic. Is that so? Sarah kept her tone light, though the casual confirmation of everything Connell had told her still sent a shock through her system. Well, from a medical perspective, you seem completely recovered, but you should still take it easy today. No swimming alone in the loch. Callum's face grew serious. I wasn't supposed to be there at all. Father will be angry when he remembers that part. I suspect he's too relieved you're safe to be angry, Sarah reassured him. But why were you there alone? The boy glanced at Morgana, then back to Sarah, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I wanted to see if the stories were true, about the Lady of the Loch who would come when the future Alpha was in danger, the one who would change everything. His golden eyes, so like his father's, were wide and earnest. And you came, just like in the prophecy. Before Sarah could process this, the bedroom door opened fully, and Connell entered. He wore a simple black shirt and jeans, but somehow managed to look regal despite the casual attire. His gaze went first to his son, relief evident in the softening of his features, then to Sarah, something more complex flickering in those golden depths. I see our patient is awake and chatting, he said, moving to the bedside. How do you feel, Momhack? Hungry, Callum repeated, grinning up at his father. Can we have breakfast with Ms. Mackenzie? She saved me, so she should get to eat the special honey cakes that Duncan makes. Connell ruffled his son's dark hair affectionately. I think that can be arranged. He looked to Sarah. Unless you're eager to return to the village? There was a weight to the question that went beyond simple breakfast plans. Sarah knew she stood at a crossroads. She could walk away now, return to her quiet cottage in Bella Village, pretend that last night had been some strange aberration. Go back to being Sarah Mackenzie, widow and retired nurse, seeking peace in the Scottish countryside. Or she could step fully into whatever extraordinary path was unfolding before her, with all its dangers and mysteries. I'd like to hear more about this prophecy everyone keeps mentioning, she said finally. The one that apparently involves me. Connell nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. After breakfast, then. The Fraser Library contains records dating back 1,000 years, including the full text of the prophecy that has shaped our clan's destiny for centuries. He held out his hand to her, a simple gesture laden with significance. Will you join us, Sarah Mackenzie? Will you hear the truth of what you are, what we are, and what we might become together? The sunlight streaming through the windows caught his golden eyes, making them seem to glow from within. In that moment, he looked both perfectly human and utterly other, a creature of myth made flesh, offering her a doorway into a world she had never believed could exist. And despite every rational objection her mind could raise, Sarah found herself reaching for his hand, her fingers closing around his with a sense of inevitability that transcended choice. I'll join you, she said, feeling the weight of generations in her words. I want to know everything. The Fraser Library was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen outside of films or documentaries about grand European estates. 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves accessed by rolling ladders and spiral staircases. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by stained glass windows depicting wolves beneath a full moon. Ancient maps and illuminated manuscripts in glass display cases. The air smelled of leather, parchment, and time itself. Connell led Sarah through this cathedral of knowledge to a reading area near the fireplace where a breakfast had been laid out. Freshly baked pastries, fruit, coffee, and the promised honey cakes that had Callum bouncing with excitement. The boy had dressed in jeans and a sweater that might have belonged to any modern child, but something in the way he carried himself spoke of heritage and breeding far beyond his years. Eat first, Connell said, pouring coffee into fine bone china cups. Then we talk of prophecies and destinies. Sarah appreciated the chance to gather her thoughts. The morning light streaming through the stained glass cast pools of colored light across the polished wood floor, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. She watched as Callum happily devoured a honey cake, golden syrup dripping onto his plate, so normal in his childish pleasure, yet heir to an ancient, supernatural lineage. The contradiction was jarring, yet somehow perfect. You have questions, Connell said, settling into a leather chair opposite her. Ask them freely. This is a day for truth between us. Sarah considered where to begin. You mentioned a prophecy concerning your son and me. Something about a seer bloodline in the last pure alpha. Connell nodded, his expression grave. 300 years ago, during what your history books call the Jacobite Rising, our pack allied with the Scottish rebels against the English crown. We fought not for politics, but for the preservation of the old ways that the English sought to extinguish. Among our enemies was a woman of great power, neither human nor wolf, but something older. Your kind would call her a witch, though that term barely touches the truth of what she was. Morgana, Sarah said, the name falling from her lips with sudden certainty. Connell's golden eyes widened slightly. The sight is strong in you already. Yes, Morgana, though she has worn many names through the centuries. But she lives here, works for you. Keep your enemies closer, Connell said with a humorless smile. After our defeat at Culloden in 1746, when the Highland clans were broken and scattered, Morgana placed a curse upon the Fraser bloodline. The line of alphas would grow weaker with each generation until the last pure blood was born. This child would either store the strength of the pack through union with a seer of the Mackenzie line, or would perish, ending our kind forever. Callum, Sarah whispered, looking at the boy who was now exploring the shelves, blissfully unaware of the weight of destiny upon his small shoulders. My son is the culmination of centuries of careful breeding to maintain the purest alpha bloodline. His mother was from an ancient Norwegian wolf clan, chosen specifically for the strength of her lineage. A shadow passed over Connell's face. She died bringing him into the world, the first sign that the curse was reaching its culmination. Sarah's nurse's instincts prickled. What do you mean? Wolf females do not die in childbirth. Our healing abilities prevent it. Eileen was the first in 1,000 years of our history to succumb to such a fate. The clinical part of Sarah's mind noted the use of present tense when describing wolf abilities, even while discussing a woman who had died. The instinctive part of her heart responded to the grief still evident in Connell's voice. I'm sorry for your loss. Connell acknowledged her sympathy with a slight incline of his head. It was 5 years ago, and in truth ours was a union of political necessity rather than love. But she was strong, proud, a worthy mother for the future alpha. His gaze shifted to his son. When Callum was born, we thought perhaps the worst of the curse had been paid in Eileen's blood. But as he has grown, there have been signs that all is not well. His shifting abilities are unstable. He falls ill more easily than a wolf child should. And yesterday, he paused, jaw tightening. Wolfkind do not drown, Sarah. We are born knowing how to swim, just as we are born knowing how to hunt. For Callum to be in danger of drowning speaks to how the curse weakens him. A loud thud interrupted their conversation as a heavy book fell from a shelf near where Callum had been exploring. The boy looked startled, then guilty. Sorry, Father, it jumped at me. Connell rose with preternatural speed and grace, crossing to his son's side in an instant. He knelt beside the fallen tome, but did not touch it. The histories choose their readers, not the other way around, he said softly. Which one called to you, Momhack? Callum pointed at the massive leather-bound volume. That one, with the wolf and the lady on the cover. Sarah joined them, curious despite herself. The book was indeed enormous, its ancient leather binding embossed with the image of a wolf standing protectively beside a woman holding what appeared to be a crystal orb. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the detail visible even after what must have been centuries. Connell carefully opened the cover, revealing pages of handwritten text in a language Sarah didn't recognize, illuminated with gold leaf and intricate illustrations. The Book of Unions, he translated, a record of every pairing between the wolf kind and the seer bloodlines throughout our history. He looked up at Sarah, something like wonder in his expression. It has not allowed itself to be read in over 100 years. Books don't choose readers, Sarah said, her scientific mind rebelling, even as her newly awakened instincts hummed with recognition. They're inanimate objects. In your world, perhaps, Connell replied. But you're not in that world anymore, Sarah Mackenzie. He carefully lifted the massive tome and carried it to a large table near the windows. Come, if the book has awakened, it has wisdom to impart that we would be fools to ignore. The three of them gathered around the ancient volume as Connell carefully turned its pages. The text was handwritten in various styles, suggesting many authors over a vast span of time. Interspersed with the writing were illustrations of couples, always a man with wolf-like features and a woman with an otherworldly glow about her eyes. Dates accompanied each entry, stretching back nearly 2,000 years. The first recorded union was during the Roman occupation, Connell explained, his finger tracing lines of text Sarah couldn't read. A wolf warrior named Bran and a seer called Rhiannon. Their children founded both the Fraser and Mackenzie bloodlines, creating the intertwined destiny our families have shared ever since. Sarah studied the illustration of this ancient couple. The artist had captured a sense of power and mystery in their features, particularly in the woman's eyes, which seemed to look beyond the page into some distant vision. If these unions were so important, why did they stop? Why has this book been closed for a century? Connell turned more pages, moving forward through history. The last union was in 1840, Malcolm Fraser and Elspeth Mackenzie. Their bond was powerful but brief. Elspeth was burned as a witch by villagers who feared her visions. He glanced at Callum, who was listening with wide-eyed attention, then back to Sarah. After that tragedy, the Fraser Alphas decreed that no more unions would be sought with the seer bloodline. The risk to both families was deemed too great. Until now, Sarah said quietly, until Callum and the curse. Until you pulled my son from the waters and revealed yourself as the strongest seer born to your line in generations, Connell corrected. The universe does not deal in coincidences, Sarah. Your arrival in Scotland, your presence at the lock at that exact moment, your ability to see our true nature upon first touch, all of it points to the awakening of the ancient bond. The weight of his words settled over Sarah like a physical presence. She thought of her life in Boston, the safe, predictable existence she had built with Michael. Their modest apartment, their circle of friends, their plans for a retirement that never came. Nothing in that life had prepared her for standing in an ancient Scottish castle, discussing prophecies and curses with a werewolf alpha whose golden-eyed son might be tied to her destiny. I came to Scotland to find peace, she said finally. To reconnect with my roots, yes, but also to heal from losing Michael, not to become entangled in supernatural prophecies. And yet here you are, Connell replied, his deep voice gentle but unyielding. Standing in the heart of Fraser Castle with the Book of Unions open before you after a century of silence. Your grandmother fled this destiny, Sarah. Ran across an ocean to escape what she knew was coming. But some fates cannot be outrun forever. They merely wait, patient as the mountains, for the bloodline to complete its circle. The sound of the library door opening interrupted them. Rona entered, her aristocratic features composed in a mask of cool civility that did little to hide the wariness in her golden eyes. She wore a simple black dress that somehow managed to look both modern and timeless, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe braid. The pack elders have arrived, she announced, addressing her brother but watching Sarah. They're gathered in the great hall. Duncan thought it best to inform you before. She hesitated, glancing at Callum. Before matters progress further. Connell closed the Book of Unions carefully. Of course, we'll join them shortly. He turned to Sarah. The appearance of a potential seer mate after so long has significant implications for our pack. The elders will want to meet you to assess the situation for themselves. Assess me, you mean, Sarah said, feeling a flicker of irritation. I'm not a breeding prospect, Mr. Fraser. I'm a person with my own life and choices. A rare smile crossed Connell's serious features, transforming him momentarily. Indeed you are. Which is precisely what makes you worthy of consideration as more than just a solution to a curse. He held her gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable, then turned to his sister. Has Eileen arrived with her faction? Rona's expression tightened. She was the first, naturally, bringing that lapdog Ivan with her. Cousin Eileen doesn't like me, Callum volunteered, climbing onto a chair to see the adults better. She says I'm too human-looking. Sarah felt a surge of protective instinct toward the boy, surprising in its intensity. There's nothing wrong with looking human, she told him firmly, and anyone who makes you feel otherwise isn't worth your concern. Bold words from an actual human, Rona commented, though there was more curiosity than malice in her tone. You may find the pack less receptive to such sentiments, Ms. Mackenzie. especially those who still cling to the old prejudices. I've spent my career dealing with difficult people in high-stress situations, Sarah replied evenly. I doubt your pack elders can be more intimidating than an emergency room during a full moon. She paused, realizing what she just said. Though I suppose in your case, that particular example carries different connotations. Connell laughed, a rich, deep sound that seemed to fill the library. She has spirit, sister. The Mackenzie fire burns bright in this one. Let's hope it burns bright enough to withstand Eileen's venom, Rona replied. She's been positioning herself as your mate for years. The appearance of a human seer threatens everything she's schemed for. Politics, Connell said dismissively. The needs of the pack supersede personal ambitions. Eileen knows this, whatever she might wish otherwise. Sarah found herself being studied by both siblings, their golden eyes so similar, yet revealing vastly different personalities. Where Connell projected strength tempered with thoughtfulness, Rona radiated intensity and barely contained energy. Both carried themselves with the unconscious grace of predators, a subtle reminder of their dual nature. I should change before meeting your elders, Sarah said, suddenly conscious of her borrowed clothes. Make myself presentable. Your belongings were delivered to your room an hour ago, Rona informed Herschel, though I took the liberty of having some more appropriate attire sent up as well. First impressions matter greatly to the old ones. The implication that her own clothes wouldn't be suitable might have offended Sarah in other circumstances, but she understood the cultural gap she was facing. This wasn't just about meeting potential in-laws. It was a diplomatic encounter between species, with implications she was only beginning to comprehend. Thank you, she said simply. I appreciate the consideration. Callum tugged at Sarah's hand. Can I show you the way back to your room? I know all the shortcuts in the castle. Sarah looked to Connell, who nodded his permission. An excellent idea. I need to brief the elders before introducing you. Callum can bring you to the Great Hall in half an hour. As she followed the excited boy through the castle's labyrinthine corridors, Sarah tried to sort through the whirlwind of revelations. In less than 24 hours, she had discovered that werewolves existed, that her own grandmother had been part of some ancient bloodline of seers, and that she herself might be the key to breaking a centuries-old curse. It was overwhelming, the stuff of fantasy novels rather than real life. Yet there was a strange sense of rightness beneath her disbelief, as if some part of her had always known there was more to the world than what could be seen and measured. Michael would have called it magical thinking, a coping mechanism for grief. But Michael had lived in a world of engineering problems with clear solutions. He had never felt the pull of ancient bloodlines or the weight of prophecy. Sarah's room looked different in the daylight, the luxurious appointments more evident. A four-poster bed with midnight blue velvet hangings, a sitting area with comfortable chairs flanking a small fireplace, a bathroom that somehow combined modern amenities with Victorian elegance. Her suitcases had been unpacked, her modest clothes hanging in a massive armoire alongside several garments she didn't recognize. Those are from Rona, Callum explained, noticing her gaze. She said you would need proper clothes for meeting the pack. He bounced on his toes, full of the restless energy of childhood. The blue dress is pretty. You should wear that one. Sarah examined the suggested garment, a simple but elegant wrap dress in deep navy blue. The fabric was obviously expensive, the cut classic but flattering. Your aunt has good taste, she admitted, and apparently a good eye for sizing. Wolves can tell a lot from scent, Callum informed her matter-of-factly, like how tall you are and how much you weigh, and if you're sick or scared or happy. His golden eyes, so like his father's, studied her with childish directness. You smell like medicine and books and something else that makes father act funny. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. I think I'll change now, she said, gently steering the boy toward the door. Thank you for being my guide, Callum. Will you be my friend even if the elders are mean to you? He asked suddenly, his face serious beyond his years. Some people don't like us when they find out what we are. The simple question touched something deep in Sarah's heart. Whatever supernatural destiny might be unfolding around them, this was still a child seeking reassurance in an uncertain world. I'll be your friend no matter what, she promised. That's what happens when you save someone's life. You're stuck with them. Callum's face brightened. That's what Father says about life debts. They're forever. He skipped toward the door, then turned with a final thought. The elders can be scary, but Father is Alpha. He won't let them hurt you. With that oddly comforting but disturbing assurance, he disappeared down the corridor, leaving Sarah to prepare for what promised to be one of the strangest social encounters of her life. The blue dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Sarah paired it with her own low-heel boots and a simple gold pendant that had been a gift from Michael on their 15th anniversary. Her hair she wore loose around her shoulders, its auburn waves touched with silver at the temples. Looking in the mirror, she saw a woman who appeared composed and confident, giving no hint of the turmoil beneath the surface. Callum returned precisely on time, now accompanied by Duncan. The older man assessed Sarah with an approving nod. "You'll do," he said gruffly. "Rona has a good eye." "Is this an inspection or a diplomatic summit?" Sarah asked, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from her voice. "I feel like I'm being presented at court." Duncan's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "Not far from the truth. The Fraser pack has maintained many of the old Highland traditions, including a certain formality when important matters are at stake." He offered her his arm in an old-fashioned gesture. "Shall we?" The great hall had been transformed since her late-night conversation with Connell. The long table was now set for what appeared to be a formal gathering, with elaborate place settings and fresh flowers. Standing in conversational groups around the room were about 20 people of various ages, all with the distinctive golden eyes of the wolf kind. They fell silent as Sarah entered on Duncan's arm, all gazes turning to assess her. Connell stood at the head of the table, resplendent in what appeared to be a modernized version of traditional Highland formal wear. Black jacket and kilt in the Fraser tartan, silver buttons gleaming in the light from the massive chandeliers overhead. He looked every inch the clan chieftain, power and authority evident in his bearing. "My friends," he addressed the gathering, his deep voice carrying effortlessly, "I present to you Sarah Mackenzie, descended from the seer bloodline that has been entwined with our own since the days of Bran and Rhiannon." A murmur went through the assembled wolves, some expressions curious, others wary or openly hostile. Sarah kept her chin up, meeting their gazes steadily. She had faced down belligerent patients and distraught families in the emergency room for decades. She could handle a room full of werewolves. "The human looks ordinary enough," said a sharp female voice. A striking woman with copper hair and cold golden eyes stepped forward from the group. She wore a sleek modern pantsuit in deep burgundy that managed to look both professional and predatory. "Hardly the stuff of prophecy, cousin." "Aileen," Connell acknowledged with a slight nod. "Ms. Mackenzie saved my son's life yesterday when the curse manifested in a near drowning." Upon touching both Callum and myself, she demonstrated the seer's gift of vision with remarkable clarity. The Book of Unions opened to her presence after a century of silence. And this information caused a stir among the elders, several of whom exchanged significant looks. An elderly man with a full white beard stepped forward, leaning on an intricately carved walking stick. "If the book has awakened, we must consider the possibility that the prophecy is indeed in motion." He turned rheumy golden eyes toward Sarah. "Tell us, daughter of the Mackenzie line, what did you see when you touched our Alpha and his heir?" Sarah glanced at Connell, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I saw fragments of their lives," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Past moments. Connell in battles from what appeared to be different centuries. Callum's birth. Moments of transformation between human and wolf form." "Parlor tricks," Eileen dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. "Any sensitive could pick up surface impressions. The true seer gift goes beyond mere glimpses of the past." "And what would you know of the seer gifts, Aileen?" This came from Rona, who had materialized at Sarah's side like a protective shadow. "Your bloodline has never shown the slightest sensitivity to the mysteries." Aileen's eyes flashed with annoyance. "I know what the histories tell us. The Mackenzie seers could walk between past, present, and future as easily as we shift our forms. They could see across vast distances, speak with those long dead, predict the outcome of battles and the changing of seasons." Her gaze raked Sarah dismissively. "This human has demonstrated none of these abilities." "The gift awakens gradually." Morgana's voice cut through the tension as she entered the hall. The elderly woman moved with that uncanny grace that seemed at odds with her apparent age, her pale blue eyes finding Sarah immediately. It must be nurtured, trained, but the potential is clearly there. I have tested her blood myself. Sarah stiffened. Tested my blood? When? Morgana smiled thinly. The tea you drank last night contained an infusion that reveals the seer markers. Your reaction confirmed what I suspected from the moment you crossed our threshold. The casual admission that she had been drugged without her knowledge or consent sent a surge of anger through Sarah. You had no right, she began. But Connell raised a hand, silencing her with a simple gesture in a way that both impressed and irritated her. Morgana serves the needs of the pack, he said, his tone making it clear the matter was closed for now. And what she has confirmed gives us reason for both hope and caution. The prophecy speaks specifically of a seer of full power bonding with the last pure alpha. If Sarah's abilities are still awakening, we must consider how best to proceed. An older woman with silver-streaked dark hair and a dignified bearing spoke up. The traditional path would be a formal courtship, followed by the bonding ceremony at the next full moon if compatibility is confirmed. She studied Sarah with more curiosity than hostility. But it has been many generations since such protocols were enacted, and never with a human who came to her heritage so late in life. I haven't agreed to any courtship or bonding, Sarah interjected, feeling increasingly like she was being discussed as a breeding prospect rather than a person with agency. I only just learned about all of this yesterday. The human has spirit, commented a burly man with a salt and pepper beard. That bodes well for strong offspring. Offspring? Sarah nearly choked on the word. I'm 45 years old, well past my childbearing years. A ripple of what sounded like amusement went through the gathering. Wolf-kind mate bonds extend the human lifespan, explained the silver-haired woman kindly. If you are indeed Connell's true mate, you would share his longevity and vitality, including reproductive capabilities well beyond normal human limits. The implication was staggering. Sarah looked to Connell, who met her gaze steadily. It is true, he confirmed. The oldest recorded age for a human bonded to one of our kind was 162, and she bore children well into her 70s. This is absurd, Aileen broke in. We're discussing mating bonds and offspring when we haven't even confirmed this woman is truly a seer of the bloodline. A few visions upon touch could be explained by many phenomena. Let her prove her worth before we rewrite pack law for her. And how would you suggest she do that, cousin? Connell asked, a dangerous edge entering his voice. Aileen's smile was sharp as a blade. The traditional way. Let her walk the path of visions. If she truly carries the seer blood, she will emerge with prophecy on her lips. If not, she shrugged elegantly. Then we need not waste further time on this matter. A murmur of agreement passed through the assembled wolves. Even those who had seemed friendly to Sarah nodded at the suggestion. Clearly, this path of visions held significant meaning in their culture. What exactly does this involve? Sarah asked, directing her question to Connell rather than Aileen. The path of visions is an ancient ritual, he explained, his expression grave. A cave system beneath the castle that has been sacred to both our kinds since before written history. Those with the sight enter and commune with the energies there. It is not without risk, but every confirmed seer in our recorded history has walked the path successfully. Including my grandmother? Sarah asked. A shadow passed over Connell's features. Margaret walked the path at 17 and emerged with visions so disturbing that many in the pack wished to silence her permanently. It was then that the decision was made to send her across the ocean for her own protection and to prevent her prophecies from coming to pass. The revelation sent a chill through Sarah. What had her grandmother seen that was so terrible? And why did Sarah suddenly feel certain that those same visions awaited her if she accepted this challenge? You don't have to do this, Rona said quietly at her side. As a guest who saved the Alpha's heir, you have the right to refuse. But if I refuse, I'll never be accepted by your pack, Sarah concluded, reading between the lines. And whatever answers I came to Scotland seeking will remain hidden. There is wisdom in the human, commented the elderly man with the walking stick. She understands our ways already. Connell moved to stand before Sarah, close enough that she could sense the heat radiating from his body, smell the unique scent that was his alone. a mixture of pine, wood smoke, and something wilder that defied description. The choice is yours, he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone. But know this, regardless of your decision, you have my protection for as long as you remain within our territory. The sincerity in his golden eyes touched something in Sarah, a recognition that went beyond their brief acquaintance. There was honor in this man, this wolf. Whatever game the others might be playing, Connell Fraser would keep his word. I'll walk your path, she decided, raising her voice so all could hear. Not to prove my worth to anyone here, but to understand the gift that has awakened in me, to learn what my grandmother knew and why she kept it secret all these years. Approval showed on many faces, though Aileen's expression remained coldly skeptical. Morgana stepped forward, those pale blue eyes alight with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite identify. Then it shall be done at moonrise, the old woman announced. I will prepare the sacred herbs and ointments. The Alpha will guide you to the entrance of the path, as tradition demands. But beyond that threshold, you walk alone, seer. The formality of the pronouncement settled over the gathering like a spell. Even Eileen seemed sobered by the turn of events. One by one, the pack members approached Sarah, introducing themselves with ceremonial gravity. The elderly man with the walking stick was Hamish, senior elder of the pack. The silver-haired woman was Fiona, keeper of ceremonies. The burly man was Gavin, master of the hunt. Each greeted her with careful respect, their initial wariness tempered now that she had accepted their challenge. Only Aileen remained aloof, watching the proceedings with thinly veiled contempt. The copper-haired beauty eventually approached, her movements fluid and predatory. Humans have died on the path before, she said softly, pitching her voice so only Sarah could hear. Their minds broken by visions they weren't strong enough to bear. I wonder if Boston emergency rooms prepare one for such encounters with the unknown. Before Sarah could respond, Callum appeared at her side, his small hand slipping into hers with unself-conscious trust. Don't worry about cousin Eileen, he said loudly enough for others to hear. She's just angry because father won't mate with her, even though she's been trying forever. A ripple of suppressed amusement went through the gathering. Aileen's golden eyes flashed with genuine anger, a glimpse of the wolf beneath the polished human exterior. Children should be seen and not heard, she said through gritted teeth. And cousins should remember their place, Connell interjected smoothly, coming to stand beside his son and Sarah in a tableau that wasn't lost on anyone present. The pack meets again after moonrise to hear what the path reveals. Until then, I extend the hospitality of Fraser Castle to all clans represented here today. The pronouncement clearly signaled the end of the formal gathering. The assembled wolves began to disperse, some remaining to talk in small groups, others leaving the great hall for other parts of the castle. Eileen departed with a final cold look at Sarah, accompanied by a tall, silent man who must have been the Ivan that Rona had mentioned. Well handled, Duncan murmured, materializing at Connell's side. The challenge is traditional enough that even the traditionalists can't object, but it gives us time to prepare her properly. Prepare me for what exactly? Sarah asked, her earlier confidence beginning to waver now that she had committed to this mysterious ritual. What is this path of visions, Shun? Connell's expression was grave. A sacred place where the barriers between times and worlds grows thin. A place where those with the sight can access the full depth of their abilities, but at considerable risk to their sanity if unprepared. He glanced down at Callum, who was still holding Sarah's hand possessively. Mumhack, go with Rona to your lessons. I need to speak with Ms. Mackenzie alone. The boy looked ready to protest, but a gentle nudge from his aunt changed his mind. Will you tell me what you see on the path? He asked Sarah, his young face serious. Father says the future isn't fixed, but sometimes knowing helps us change it. If I can, Sarah promised, touched by his concern. Now go be brilliant at your lessons. Once the boy had departed with Rona, Connell led Sarah back toward the library, his long strides measured to accommodate her more human pace. You should not have agreed so quickly, he said, his deep voice rumbling with concern. The path is dangerous even for those raised in the knowledge of their gifts. Would refusing have been better? Proving Aileen right about my unworthiness before I even begin? Aileen's opinion matters little compared to your safety, Connell replied sharply. Then more gently, but your instincts were sound. The pack respects courage and directness. By accepting the challenge, you have earned a measure of regard that would have taken months to build otherwise. The library was empty now, the morning light replaced by the golden glow of afternoon. The Book of Unions still lay open on the table where they had left it hours before. Connell went to it, turning pages with careful reverence until he found what he sought. Here, he said, gesturing Sarah closer, the account of your grandmother's walk on the path. The page showed an illustration of a young woman with Sarah's green eyes and determined set to her jaw. Beside the portrait was a lengthy text in the same unfamiliar language as the rest of the book. What does it say? Sarah asked. Margaret Mackenzie, last of the known seer bloodline, walked the path on Samoan, 1944, Connell translated. She entered at moonrise and emerged 3 hours later with blood on her lips and terror in her eyes. The vision she received spoke of great devastation for the pack, of betrayal from within, of the last pure alpha falling to shadow before his time. The elders decreed her visions too dangerous to be recorded in full. By unanimous decision, she was sent across the ocean with a guardian to ensure the prophecy could not come to pass. Sarah stared at the image of her grandmother as a young woman, trying to reconcile this account with the practical, loving grandmother she had known. Margaret had never spoken of Scotland as anything but a place of happy childhood memories, had never mentioned visions or prophecies or wolfkind living in ancient castles. Had she truly forgotten, or had she spent her life guarding secrets too dangerous to share, even with her own family? What happened to her guardian? Sarah asked. I never met anyone from Scotland in our family circle. Connell's expression softened with something like compassion. He was killed in 1963, a hunting accident officially. Though there were those who suspected Morgana's involvement, nothing could be proven. Morgana again, Sarah murmured. She seems to be at the center of much of your pack's troubles. She is complicated, Connell acknowledged, ancient beyond even our reckoning, with knowledge of magics that predate civilization itself. She has served the Fraser pack for centuries, but always on her own terms, with her own agenda that not even I, as Alpha, have fully discerned. Yet you keep her close, allow her to prepare the ritual I'm about to undertake. Connell's golden eyes held Sarah's steadily. Some powers cannot be controlled, only channeled. Morgana's abilities are woven into the very foundations of our pack structure. To remove her would risk destabilizing everything we have built. He hesitated, then added, but you are right to be wary. Trust your instincts, especially on the path. The visions will show many truths and many possible futures. Discerning which are genuine prophecy and which are fears or wishes given form is the true test of a seer. Sarah moved away from the table, needing space to process all she had learned. The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting pools of colored light across the floor. She stood in one such pool, feeling the warmth on her skin, trying to ground herself in physical sensation as her mind grappled with concepts that defied her scientific training. What am I to you, Connell? She asked finally, turning to face him. A potential solution to your son's curse? A political alliance to strengthen your position? Or is there something more that neither of us is acknowledging? The Alpha approached slowly, his movements deliberate, as if giving her time to retreat if she wished. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see flecks of darker gold in his unusual eyes. Smell the scent that was uniquely his. From the moment you pulled my son from the water, I have felt a connection to you that goes beyond gratitude, he said, his voice low and intense. When our hands touched and I saw that you could see me, truly see all that I am, it awakened something I had thought long dead within me. He paused, searching for words. The bond between true mates is not a political arrangement, Sarah. It is a recognition of souls that have known each other across time and space, a completion that makes both stronger than either could be alone. You're saying you believe I'm your mate, Sarah said, the word strange on her tongue, based on a day's acquaintance and some shared visions. I'm saying I feel the possibility of it, Connell corrected. The final recognition cannot be forced or rushed. It must grow naturally or not at all. His expression softened slightly. I have lived 5 centuries, Sarah Mackenzie. I have known many women, wolf and human alike. I have fathered children and led armies and built a sanctuary for my kind, in a world that would destroy us if they knew we existed. In all that time, I have never felt the resonance I feel with you. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep within Sarah. This powerful ancient being was making himself vulnerable to her, revealing feelings that his position as alpha might normally require him to conceal. And despite all her rational objections, all the reasons this entire situation was impossible, she couldn't deny the answering resonance within herself. I need time, she said finally. I came to Scotland seeking peace and connection to my roots. Instead, I've found werewolves and prophecies and visions. It's a lot to process for someone who has spent her life in the world of emergency medicine and scientific certainty. Time you shall have, Connell promised. But first, the path awaits, and whatever visions it reveals may change both our perspectives on what comes next. A discreet knock at the library door interrupted them. Duncan entered, his weathered face grave. Forgive the intrusion, Alpha, but the young lord has taken ill suddenly. Morgana is with him, but he asked for Miss Mackenzie. Alarm flashed across Connell's features. What symptoms? Fever, trembling. He complains that his blood burns. Duncan's golden eyes shifted to Sarah. He became agitated after his lessons and called out her name several times. Without waiting for further explanation, Connell headed for the door, gesturing for Sarah to follow. They moved swiftly through the castle corridors, Sarah nearly running to keep up with the Alpha's long strides. Connell's concern was palpable, a tangible energy that seemed to radiate from him in waves. They found Callum in his bedroom, lying pale and trembling beneath heavy blankets, despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Morgana bent over him, her thin hands pressing a cloth soaked in some herbal concoction to his brow. Rona stood nearby, her usual composure fractured by obvious worry. Father, Callum called weakly as they entered. His golden eyes, usually so bright, seemed dimmed by whatever afflicted him. I tried to be brave like you said, but it hurts. Connell was at his son's bedside in an instant, one large hand gently smoothing back the boy's sweat-dampened hair. Where does it hurt, Momhack? Everywhere, Callum whimpered, like my blood is on fire, like I'm trying to shift but can't. His gaze found Sarah, and a flicker of relief crossed his pained features. You came. Sarah moved to the opposite side of the bed, her nurse's training taking over as she assessed the child's condition. His pulse was rapid but weak, his breathing shallow, his skin hot to the touch but with a strange bottled appearance that reminded her of bruising beneath the surface. Nothing in her medical experience matched these symptoms exactly. When did this start? She asked Rona, keeping her voice calm and professional. After his lessons, he was working with Morgana on shifter meditation techniques and suddenly collapsed, Rona replied, her voice tight with concern. It came on in minutes, not gradually. Sarah glanced at Morgana, who was mixing something in a small bowl, her pale blue eyes focused on her work. What exactly were these meditation techniques? Standard practices for young shifters, Morgana replied without looking up. Breathing exercises, visualization, connecting with the wolf aspect. Something about the old woman's tone raised Sarah's suspicions, but she focused on the patient first. Callum, can you tell me exactly what happened before you started feeling bad? The boy's eyes fluttered open. Morgana gave me special tea to help me connect with my wolf. It tasted strange. Then we did the breathing like always, but everything got hot and spinny. He reached for Sarah's hand. You can make it stop. I saw it. Saw what, sweetheart? Sarah asked, allowing him to grasp her hand despite the risk of triggering her new visionary abilities at a moment when she needed to stay focused. In the mist, when I was drowning, I saw you making the burning stop. Callum's golden eyes locked on hers with desperate intensity. You put your hands on my head and the fire went away. Connell looked from his son to Sarah. He's describing a healing vision. Sometimes when our kind are near death, we glimpse possible futures. I'm a nurse, not a faith healer, Sarah protested, though even as she spoke, she felt a strange tingling in her palms, an urge to place them on Callum's temples, just as he had described. The seer bloodline carries healing abilities, Morgana commented, approaching with her bowl of mixed herbs. Not like modern medicine, older, more direct, a channeling of life energy itself. Sarah looked at the suffering child, then at his father's worried face. Whatever skepticism she might normally feel was outweighed by Callum's obvious distress and her own growing certainty that this situation went beyond conventional medical understanding. "I don't know if this will work," she warned, "but I'm willing to try if you'll allow it." Connell nodded, his expression a mixture of concern and hope. If Callum saw it in a death vision, there is truth in it. "Please." Taking a deep breath to center herself, Sarah gently placed her palms on either side of Callum's hot forehead. At first, she felt nothing beyond the fever heat of his skin. Then gradually, a tingling sensation began to build in her hands, a warmth that seemed to flow from her core, down her arms, and out through her fingertips. Images flickered through her mind, Callum running through forests on four paws, joyful in his wolf form. The boy sitting on a throne-like chair beside his father in the great hall, receiving the bows of assembled wolves. Callum as a young man, strong and confident, his golden eyes glowing with alpha power. But beneath these hopeful visions ran a darker current, a shadow that clung to the boy's life force, constricting it, poisoning it. A curse made manifest, taking physical form within his small body. Acting on pure instinct, Sarah focused her awareness on this shadow, not fighting it directly, but surrounding it with the healing energy that flowed through her, containing it, neutralizing it, like white blood cells encapsulating an infection. The effort was enormous, draining her in a way no medical procedure ever had. Sweat beaded on her brow, her arms trembled, her vision narrowed until all she could see was Callum's face and the golden light that seemed to pulse between them. "Enough," Morgana's voice cut through her concentration, sharp as a blade. "You'll kill yourself if you continue." Sarah felt hands pulling her back, breaking the connection. She stumbled, would have fallen if Connell hadn't caught her, his strong arms supporting her as the room spun dizzily around her. "Did it work?" she managed to ask. On the bed, Callum lay still, his eyes closed, but his breathing deeper and more regular. The mottled appearance had faded from his skin, and his expression was peaceful rather than pained. Rona pressed a hand to his forehead. "The fever's broken," she reported, wonder in her voice. "His pulse is normalizing." "Impossible," Morgana muttered, though something in her pale eyes suggested she had expected this very outcome. No untrained seer should be capable of such healing. "And yet she has done it," Connell said, still supporting Sarah, who leaned against him gratefully as her strength slowly returned. "My son lives, while your remedies did nothing, Morgana." The old woman's face revealed nothing, but Sarah sensed a calculation taking place behind those pale eyes. "Perhaps the path will reveal why this human's powers manifest so strongly without training," she said finally. "If she still has the strength to walk it after this display." Callum's eyes fluttered open. "Sarah," he called weakly. She moved back to his bedside, taking a small hand in hers. "I'm here. How do you feel?" "Better," he said simply. "The burning stopped, just like I saw." His golden eyes, clearer now, studied her face. "You're really strong. Stronger than Morgana, I think." The old woman made a dismissive sound. "Children's fancies. Rest now, young lord. Your body has been through an ordeal." "Will you still walk the path?" Callum asked Sarah, ignoring Morgana completely. "Father says it's dangerous, but I saw you there too, finding the truth." "I'll walk it," Sarah assured him, though her body felt drained in a way that made her wonder if she would have the strength when moonrise came. "But you need to rest and recover your strength." The boy nodded, his eyelids already growing heavy. "The shadows are still there," he murmured as sleep began to claim him. "But you pushed them back. No one else could do that, not even Father." Within moments he was asleep, his breathing deep and regular. Connell studied his son for a long moment, then turned to Sarah with an expression that combined wonder, gratitude, and something deeper she wasn't yet ready to name. "You have given me back my son," he said simply. "Whatever comes next, know that the Fraser pack stands in your debt." "I don't want debt," Sarah replied tiredly. "I just want answers. About my grandmother, about these abilities I never knew I had, about why your son nearly died and how I was able to help him." She looked at Morgana, who was gathering her herbs and bowls with methodical precision. "And I suspect some of those answers lie with your healer here." Morgana's pale eyes revealed nothing. The path will show you all you need to know, she said enigmatically, if you have the courage to see it. With that, she swept from the room, her movements as graceful and unsettling as ever. Rona moved to stand beside her brother, both of them watching the sleeping child with matching expressions of protective concern. What happened here goes beyond a simple manifestation of the curse, she said quietly. This was a direct attack on Callum's life force. Something or someone accelerated the curse's effects dramatically. Eileen, Connell suggested, his voice hardening. Rona shook her head. Even she would not dare such a direct move against the heir. This is something else. Something older and more patient in its malice. Sarah sank into a chair beside Callum's bed, suddenly exhausted beyond words. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over her like a wave, from pulling a drowning child from a Scottish loch to discovering werewolves to healing a cursed wolf prince with abilities she hadn't known she possessed. It was too much to process, too fantastic to accept, yet undeniably real. Rest while you can, Connell advised gently. Moonrise comes in a few hours and the path awaits. Whatever force has accelerated the curse clearly fears what you might discover there, which suggests that the answers we seek lie within the ancient visions. Sarah looked at the sleeping child, then at his father whose golden eyes held equal measures of gratitude, concern, and something that might have been dawning affection. I'll be ready, she promised, though how she would find the strength she couldn't imagine. For Callum and for myself. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the Highland Mountains, Sarah sat in quiet vigil beside the sleeping boy, gathering her resources for the trial that lay ahead. Whatever awaited her on the mysterious path of visions, she sensed it would change not just her understanding of herself and her heritage, but the course of her life from this moment forward. The path she had walked as Sarah Mackenzie, Boston emergency room nurse and grieving widow, had led her inexorably to this ancient Scottish castle and the golden-eyed beings who dwelled within it. Now a new path opened before her, shrouded in mist and mystery, promising answers but also dangers she could scarcely imagine. Somewhere in the forest beyond the castle walls, a wolf howled, the sound echoing across the centuries like a summons. Or a warning. Moonrise over the Scottish Highlands transformed the ancient landscape into a realm of silver shadows and whispered secrets. From the highest tower of Fraser Castle, Sarah watched as the full moon crested the mountains, its pale light spilling across forests and moors that had witnessed centuries of magic and mystery. The events of the day had left her physically exhausted but mentally alert, her senses heightened in ways she had never experienced before healing Callum. The boy had recovered remarkably after her intervention, falling into a deep, restorative sleep that Connell assured her was the natural healing state of wolfkind. But questions lingered. Who or what had caused the sudden acceleration of the curse? Why had her untrained abilities been effective when Morgana's ancient knowledge had failed? And most pressing of all, what awaited her on the mysterious path of visions that had so terrified her grandmother nearly 80 years ago? A presence at her side broke Sarah's reverie. Connell stood beside her at the tower window, his powerful frame silhouetted against the night sky. In the moonlight, his features seemed more sharply defined, the wolf beneath the human surface closer to the skin. "It's time," he said simply, his deep voice resonating in the quiet chamber. Sarah nodded, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. She had changed into clothes Rona had provided for the ritual. Simple linen trousers and a tunic in a soft gray that seemed to catch and hold the moonlight. Around her neck hung her own pendant, the gold warm against her skin, a tether to the life she had known before all this. "Will it hurt?" she asked, surprising herself with the directness of the question. Connell considered her words carefully. "Not physically. The path touches mind and soul rather than flesh. But what you may see there," he paused, searching for words, "the weight of possible futures can be a terrible burden to bear. My own mother walked the path as a young woman, though she was not of the seer bloodline. She was never the same afterward." That's not exactly reassuring. A ghost of a smile touched Connell's lips. "I promised you truth, not comfort. But know this, you are stronger than you realize, Sarah Mackenzie. You proved that today when you saved my son's life. Whatever the path reveals, I believe you have the strength to bear it." They descended through the castle in silence, moving deeper with each turning of the ancient spiral staircase. The modern amenities of the upper levels gradually gave way to more primitive conditions. Torches instead of electric lights, rough-hewn stone instead of plastered walls. The air grew cooler, damper, touched with the scent of earth and old water. At the bottom of the final staircase, they emerged into a large cavern where the rest of the pack awaited. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering shadows across solemn faces. Rona stood near the front, her expression tense but encouraging. Duncan and several other warriors formed a protective semicircle around Callum, who had insisted on attending despite his ordeal. The boy looked pale but determined, his golden eyes following Sarah's every movement. Eileen and her faction stood apart, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. And at the center of the cavern, beside an ancient stone archway carved with symbols Sarah didn't recognize, waited Morgana. The old woman had donned ceremonial robes for the occasion, midnight blue embroidered with silver symbols that seemed to shift and change in the torchlight. Around her neck hung a crystal pendant that glowed with an inner blue light. "The seer has come to walk the path," Morgana announced, her voice echoing in the cavern with surprising strength. "Let all bear witness to what shall be revealed." The assembled wolves stamped their feet once in unison, the sound reverberating through the stone chamber like distant thunder. The formality of the moment struck Sarah anew, the realization that she was participating in a ritual that stretched back thousands of years, connecting her to ancestors she had never known she had. "Approach, daughter of the Mackenzie line," Morgana commanded, gesturing Sarah forward. As Sarah stepped toward the archway, Connell moved with her, one hand lightly touching the small of her back in a gesture that was both protective and reassuring. The simple contact grounded her, steadied her nerves in the face of the unknown. "The Alpha may guide you to the threshold," Morgana acknowledged, "but beyond that you walk alone, as all seers must." They stopped before the ancient archway. Up close, Sarah could see that the symbols carved into the stone were incredibly old, worn smooth in places by the passage of countless hands over centuries. The opening beyond revealed only darkness, a passageway that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The ritual is simple but demanding," Morgana explained, her pale blue eyes fixed on Sarah with unnerving intensity. "You will enter the path with nothing but yourself and your sight. No light to guide you, no voice to comfort you. Within, you will encounter visions of what was, what is, and what may yet be. Some will be true prophecy. Others will be shadows of fear or desire given form to test your discernment. The true seer learns to know the difference." The old woman held out a small clay bowl containing a thick, dark paste that gleamed wetly in the torchlight. "This salve will open your inner eye fully to the energies of the path. It has been used by your bloodline for thousands of years." Sarah hesitated, recalling Morgana's earlier unauthorized testing of her blood and Callum's sudden illness after consuming the woman's special tea. "What's in it?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Morgana's ancient features. "Herbs sacred to both our kinds. Wolf's bane to enhance vision. Rowan for protection. Heather for healing. And other elements too old to have names in your modern tongue." "Wolf's bane is poisonous to humans," Sarah objected, her medical training automatically asserting itself. "Not in this preparation, and not to one with seer blood," Morgana countered smoothly. "Every Mackenzie who has walked the path has used this salve. It is part of the ancient compact between our kinds." Connell's hand tightened slightly at Sarah's back. "The choice is yours," he said quietly. "But the ritual has remained unchanged since before my grandfather's time." Sarah studied Morgana's impassive face, searching for any sign of deception. She found nothing but the same inscrutable calm the woman always projected. Making her decision, she reached for the bowl. "I apply it myself," she stated firmly, making it a condition rather than a question. Morgana's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. "As you wish, to the forehead, the eyelids, and the hollow of the throat." Sarah dipped her fingers into the paste. It was cool to the touch and smelled strongly of earth and herbs, with underlying notes she couldn't identify. Following Morgana's instructions, she applied it to her forehead, feeling a strange tingling sensation almost immediately. When she touched her eyelids, the tingling intensified, spreading throughout her body. By the time she reached the hollow of her throat, her fingertips were numb, and her vision had begun to blur at the edges, colors becoming more vivid, sounds more distinct. "The path opens to the seer," Morgana intoned, stepping back from the archway. "May you find truth in the darkness." Connell turned Sarah to face him, his golden eyes intense in the torchlight. "Remember who you are," he said softly. "Hold to that when the visions come." The genuine concern in his voice touched Sarah deeply. On impulse, she leaned forward and pressed her lips briefly to his. The contact sent a jolt of energy through her entire body, more powerful than any vision she had experienced yet. For an instant, she saw them together through countless possible futures, ruling the pack side by side, raising Callum and other children, growing old yet remaining vital through the decades. She saw herself transformed yet still essentially Sarah, stronger, wilder, but with the same compassionate heart. When she pulled away, Connell's expression was one of wonder and dawning certainty. "Go safely," he whispered. "Return to us." With those words echoing in her mind, Sarah turned and stepped through the ancient archway into the waiting darkness. The transition was instantaneous and disorienting. One moment she stood in a torch-lit cavern surrounded by watching eyes. The next, she was enveloped in absolute darkness, the sounds of the gathered pack silenced as if they had never existed. The air around her felt different, heavier, charged with an energy that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. Sarah took a tentative step forward, her hands outstretched in the blackness. Instead of the stone passage she had expected, her feet moved across what felt like soft earth. The air against her face was cool but not damp, carrying scents of pine and heather rather than the underground mustiness of the cavern. It was as if the archway had transported her not deeper into the earth, but somewhere else entirely. Gradually, her eyes adjusted to the darkness, or perhaps the darkness itself began to change. A faint luminescence seemed to emanate from the ground beneath her feet, revealing a narrow path winding through what appeared to be a nighttime forest. Massive ancient trees towered on either side, their branches forming a canopy that obscured the sky, yet somehow allowed moonlight to filter through in dappled patterns. "This can't be real," Sarah whispered, her voice sounding strange and distant in her own ears. "The path is underground. This is some kind of hallucination." "Reality is more malleable than your modern mind allows," replied a voice that seemed to come from the trees themselves. "Neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but ancient beyond reckoning. The path exists between worlds, between times. What you see is as real as you are, daughter of seers." Sarah turned slowly, trying to locate the source of the voice, but saw only trees and shadows. The path beneath her feet pulsed with that strange blue luminescence, beckoning her forward. Having no other guidance, she began to walk, each step carrying her deeper into the impossible forest. As she moved forward, the landscape began to shift subtly around her. The trees thinned, giving way to open moors beneath a sky ablaze with more stars than she had ever seen. In the distance, a bonfire burned, figures moving around it in what appeared to be some kind of ritual dance. Drawn by curiosity, Sarah moved closer. The scene resolved into clarity as she approached. Men and women clothed in animal skins circled the great fire, their movements precise and meaningful. At the center of their circle stood a woman with flowing red hair, her arms raised to the star-filled sky, voice chanting in a language Sarah didn't recognize yet somehow understood. Beside her stood a massive man whose features seemed to shift between human and wolf in the firelight. "The first union," whispered the voice that wasn't a voice. "Rhiannon of the sight, and Bran of the wolf blood. From them, both your lines descend." Sarah watched, transfixed, as the ancient ceremony unfolded. Rhiannon turned to face Bran, placing her hands upon his chest. Where she touched him, a golden light bloomed, spreading throughout his body. In return, he pressed his forehead to hers, and the same light flowed from him into her. When they separated, both glowed with a combined power that illuminated the entire gathering. The seer brought clarity of vision to the wolves who were lost in their animal nature, the voice explained. The wolf brought strength and longevity to the seer, whose power burned too brightly for a single human lifetime. Together they created balance. The scene dissolved, replaced by a rapid succession of images too quick for Sarah to fully comprehend. Battles fought across centuries. Children born with golden eyes and the gift of second sight, castles built and burned and rebuilt, persecutions and escapes, unions celebrated beneath the full moon. Throughout it all, the intertwined bloodlines of Fraser and Mackenzie flowed like twin rivers through time, sometimes merging, sometimes diverging, but always connected by that original bond. The whirlwind of images finally settled on a scene Sarah recognized from her own family photographs. Her grandmother Margaret as a young woman, standing before Fraser Castle much as it looked today. Beside her stood a young Duncan, his face unlined by age but unmistakable. Their hands were clasped, their expressions a mixture of love and desperate resolve. She was his mate, Sarah realized aloud, the pieces suddenly falling into place. Duncan was the guardian sent with her to America. Theirs was a bond interrupted by necessity, the voice confirmed. The purity of their connection threatened plans long in the making. The scene shifted again. Margaret stood in the same cavern Sarah had just left, facing an ancient archway identical to the one she had passed through. But as her grandmother prepared to walk the path, a female figure stepped from the shadows. With a shock of recognition, Sarah realized she was seeing a much younger Morgana, her silver hair then a deep auburn, her lined face smooth and beautiful. But those pale blue eyes were the same, cold and calculating as she handed Margaret the ritual salve. "What did she do to her?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The same thing she did to your young wolf today," the voice replied. "Poison disguised as medicine, dark magic hidden within ancient ritual, the corruption of sacred things to serve her own purposes." The scene unfolded as if in answer to her question. Margaret entered the path just as Sarah had done, but almost immediately began to convulse, falling to her knees in the darkness. The visions that came to her were not natural prophecies but artificially induced nightmares. The Fraser pact destroyed, Connell's father murdered, a future of desolation and death. When Margaret emerged from the path hours later, she was a different woman, her eyes wild with terror, her seer gift twisted into a weapon against those she would have served. "They sent her away to protect her," Sarah whispered, understanding flowing through her like a cold river, "and to protect themselves from what Morgana had done to her." "The witch has played the longest game," confirmed the voice, "serving the Fraser pack while secretly working to destroy them, waiting patiently through centuries for the final pure alpha to be born, nurturing the curse she herself created." "But why?" Sarah demanded, anger rising within her at the manipulation of her grandmother, of Callum, of herself. "Mom, Asaf. What could be worth centuries of deception?" In answer, the vision changed again. Sarah saw Morgana in a time so ancient that the land itself looked different, younger somehow. The woman knelt before an altar stone deep in a forest clearing, her hands covered in blood, eyes wild with grief and rage. Beside the altar lay the body of a man with wolf features, his chest torn open, heart removed. "Her mate," the voice explained softly, "a Fraser ancestor who rejected her when he discovered the darkness of her magic. She has spent millennia punishing his bloodline for that rejection, weakening them generation by generation, working toward the final extinction of the line that spurned her." The revelation struck Sarah like a physical blow. The seemingly ancient and loyal servant of the pack was in fact its most dedicated enemy, playing a vengeance game measured not in years but in centuries. And Callum, innocent child that he was, represented the culmination of that vengeance, the last pure alpha whose death would fulfill Morgana's millennia-old curse. "She'll try to kill him," Sarah realized with sudden certainty. "That's why she accelerated the curse today, why she was so surprised when I was able to counter it. She knows I'm a threat to her plans." "Yes," the voice agreed. "Even now, while you walk the path and the pack awaits your visions, she prepares for the final sacrifice." Urgency flooded through Sarah, the need to return and warn Connell overwhelming. But as she turned to seek the way back, the forest around her transformed once more. She found herself standing not in the ancient woodland of visions past, but in the great hall of Fraser Castle as it existed in her own time. The room was dark, save for the moonlight streaming through the high windows and a single candle burning on the massive table. Beside that candle sat Callum, alone and frightened, eyes wide with confusion. Across from him stood Morgana, no longer bothering to disguise her true nature. The old woman's face was alight with cruel triumph as she explained something to the boy, her thin fingers tracing symbols on the table's wooden surface. "When your blood feeds the ancient stones," Morgana was saying, her voice carrying clearly to Sarah despite the apparent distance, "the Fraser line ends forever. The curse completes its work, and my vengeance is finally satisfied." "My father will stop you," Callum replied, his young voice trembling but defiant. "And Sarah, she saw you for what you are. That's why you're scared of her." Morgana laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Your father searches the path for her precious seer, not realizing she walks in dreams while I act in reality. By the time they understand what has happened, it will be too late. The moon reaches its zenith in 1 hour, and with it, the completion of a vengeance 3,000 years in the making." The vision was so vivid, so immediate, that Sarah lunged forward instinctively to protect Callum, but her hands passed through the scene like smoke, the images dispersing around her fingers. "This happens now," the voice informed her, urgency replacing its previous ethereal calm. "While you walk between worlds, the witch makes her final move. You must return." "How?" Sarah cried, turning in desperate circles as the vision faded around her. "I don't know the way back." "The path brought you here for a reason, daughter of seers, not just to show you truth, but to awaken what sleeps within you. The full power of your bloodline lies dormant no longer." As if in response to these words, the pendant at Sarah's throat grew warm, then hot against her skin. She pulled it out to find the simple gold jewelry glowing with the same blue luminescence as the path beneath her feet. The metal seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, growing brighter with each passing second. "My grandmother's necklace," she whispered, remembering the dream that had seemed so vivid that morning. "She gave this to me on my 16th birthday, said it had been in the family for generations." "The seer's talisman," confirmed the voice. "Passed from mother to daughter since the days of Rhiannon. Its power has waited for one strong enough to use it fully. That one is you, Sarah Mackenzie." Acting on instinct rather than knowledge, Sarah clasped the glowing pendant in both hands and closed her eyes. She felt the energy of the path flowing into her through her feet, up through her body, concentrating in her hands around the ancient talisman. With it came knowledge that wasn't hers yet, somehow was, as if she were remembering skills learned in another lifetime. "Show me the way home," she commanded, her voice resonating with newfound power. "Show me how to save them." The pendant flared with blinding blue light. When Sarah opened her eyes, the mysterious forest was gone. She stood instead in utter darkness, but this time the darkness felt right, felt real. Tentatively, she reached out with her hands and felt rough stone walls on either side. The underground passage. The true path. "This way," whispered a new voice. This one achingly familiar, though Sarah had never heard it in life. The ghostly figure of Margaret Mackenzie materialized before her, glowing with the same blue light as the pendant. "Follow me, granddaughter. Quickly now." Sarah didn't question the apparition. The boundaries between possible and impossible had dissolved for her somewhere along the path of visions. She followed her grandmother's spectral form through the winding underground passage, moving with increasing urgency as she felt rather than saw the passage of time. "The witch has taken the boy to the ancient circle," Margaret's spirit informed her as they hurried through the darkness. "A stone ring deep in the forest that predates even the castle. It is a place of old power, where the barriers between worlds are thin." "The pack," Sarah panted, struggling to keep up with the ghostly figure who moved unimpeded by physical limitations. "Connell, why aren't they stopping her?" "Morgana has enslaved them with an ancient spell, binding them within the castle walls while she completes her work. Only you are free to act, protected by the path in your awakening power." They rounded a final corner, and Sarah saw moonlight ahead, streaming through what appeared to be an exit different from the ceremonial archway she had entered. As they approached, she could make out a simple opening in the rock face, concealed by overgrown vines and shrubs. This was the original entrance to the path, before the castle was built atop it, Margaret explained. "It will lead you directly to the forest, near the stone circle where the witch conducts her ritual." At the threshold, the spectral figure paused, turning to face Sarah fully. Despite the ethereal blue glow, the features were unmistakably those Sarah remembered from childhood, though younger than she had ever known her grandmother in life. The talisman holds the collective power of our bloodline, Margaret said, reaching out as if to touch the pendant, though her ghostly fingers passed through it. But awakening that power fully requires sacrifice. Are you prepared for what that means? Sarah clutched the pendant, which continued to pulse with warm blue light against her palm. I'll do whatever it takes to save Callum, to stop Morgana, to break this curse once and for all. Margaret's spirit smiled sadly. The true breaking of the curse requires more than the witch's defeat. It requires the unification of the bloodlines as it was in the beginning. Wolf and seer, bound as one, creating balance where there has been only discord. You mean Connell and me, Sarah realized, the mate bond he spoke of. More than that, her grandmother corrected gently. A full transformation. The seer must become wolf. The wolf must become seer. Two natures unified in two beings, creating harmony that ripples backward and forward through time. The implications were staggering. I would have to become like them, Sarah whispered. A shifter. Is that even possible? For one of our bloodline joined with a true alpha, yes, but the process is dangerous, potentially fatal, which is why I could never complete it with Duncan. Margaret's ghostly features softened with old grief. I loved him too much to risk failure, and so I fled across the ocean, carrying his child in my womb, hoping to spare both our families further pain. My mother, Sarah breathed, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. She was half wolf. With no knowledge of her heritage, her wolf nature remained dormant, as did yours until you returned to this land and the power in your blood awakened. Margaret's form began to fade slightly, as if maintaining the manifestation was becoming difficult. You must hurry. The moon approaches its zenith. The boy has little time left. Sarah stepped through the hidden entrance into the moonlit highland forest. The night air was cool against her skin after the enclosed darkness of the path, scented with pine and heather, and something older, more primal, power, magic, the ancient heart of Scotland beating beneath the modern world. Trust your instincts, Margaret's fading voice advised as her spirit dissipated into the moonlight. They will lead you true. Alone now in the forest, Sarah closed her eyes and focused on the pendant in her hand. Its rhythm had changed, becoming more urgent, pulling her in a specific direction. Without questioning, she began to move through the trees, letting the talisman guide her. Her senses seemed heightened beyond anything she had experienced before, even during her healing of Callum. She could smell individual plants, hear the movement of small animals in the underbrush, feel the age of the trees she passed. The talisman led her unerringly through the dense forest until she came to the edge of a clearing. There, standing in a perfect circle of ancient stones, she saw Morgana. The old woman had shed all pretense of the kindly healer. Her true nature revealed in the cruel set of her features and the dark power that seemed to emanate from her in visible waves. She wore ceremonial robes of midnight blue, embroidered with silver symbols that writhed and shifted as if alive. Around her neck hung a crystal pendant that glowed with an inner red light, the malevolent counterpart to Sarah's blue talisman. In the center of the stone circle, Callum lay upon a flat altar stone, his small body bound with silver cords that glowed with unnatural light. The boy was conscious but clearly weakened, his golden eyes dulled with pain and fear. Morgana moved around him, placing objects at specific points around the altar. A silver bowl, a curved knife, herbs bundled with red thread. The preparations for a ritual sacrifice. Sarah's first instinct was to rush forward, but centuries of seer wisdom newly awakened in her blood counseled caution. Morgana was ancient and powerful, steeped in dark magic older than civilization itself. Direct confrontation would likely fail. She needed strategy, needed to use her newfound gifts effectively if she hoped to save Callum. Keeping low and hidden at the edge of the clearing, Sarah closed her eyes and concentrated on the talisman. The blue light spread from the pendant up her arms, suffusing her entire body with its protective glow. Instinctively, she knew how to shield this light from physical sight while maintaining its power. When she opened her eyes, the world looked different, layers of reality visible that had been hidden before. She could see ley lines of power running beneath the earth, converging at the stone circle. Could see the dark red aura surrounding Morgana like a toxic cloud. Could see the silver cord binding Callum for what they truly were. Tendrils of cursed magic that had been working on him since birth, now made manifest for the final sacrifice. Most importantly, she could see Morgana's true form beneath the human disguise. Not human at all, but something far older. A creature of smoke and shadow and ancient malice, wearing human shape like a well-crafted mask. Whatever she had once been had long ago been consumed by hatred and the corrupting influence of the dark magic she wielded. Sarah's analytical mind processed this information rapidly, forming a plan. The curse binding Callum was connected directly to Morgana herself, feeding her power even as it drained his life. If she could sever that connection, the backlash might weaken the witch enough to defeat her. But to reach Callum, she would need a distraction. The talisman pulsed against her skin as if in agreement. Drawing a deep breath, Sarah focused her newly awakened power into a single concentrated thought. Help me save him. The response was immediate and astonishing. From the forest around her emerged spectral, blue figures, indistinct at first but rapidly solidifying into recognizable forms. Women mostly, with a few men among them, all bearing the distinctive green eyes of the Mackenzie bloodline, her ancestors reaching across time in answer to her call. The ghostly army took shape silently, visible only to Sarah's enhanced sight, awaiting her command. With a thought rather than words, Sarah directed them. Surround the circle, create confusion, draw her attention. The spirits moved into position with silent precision. When they had encircled the clearing completely, Sarah gave the mental signal to begin. In perfect unison, the spectral figures began to glow with intensifying blue light, becoming visible even to normal sight. Morgana's head snapped up from her ritual preparations, pale eyes widening with shock and then narrowing with rage. Impossible, the witch hissed, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing. The Mackenzie bloodline was broken, its power scattered. Sarah's grandmother stepped forward from the circle of spirits, her form more defined than the others, her expression fierce with protective determination. You thought to break us, Margaret's spirit replied, her voice echoing strangely in the night air. But the bloodline always finds its way home. Morgana snarled, dropping all pretense of humanity. Her form seemed to grow larger, darker, the shadows around her deepening into something almost physical. She raised her hands, crimson energy gathering in her palms. You are nothing but echoes, she spat. Memory without substance. You cannot stop what has been in motion for 3,000 years. The witch hurled the gathered energy at Margaret's spirit, but before it could strike, all the spectral figures began to move, swirling around the stone circle in a blur of blue light, making it impossible to target any single one. The distraction was working. Morgana turned in furious circles, throwing bolt after bolt of crimson power at the elusive spirits, her attention completely diverted from the altar where Callum lay. This was Sarah's chance. Keeping her own presence shielded, she darted from the tree line to the nearest standing stone, then from stone to stone around the perimeter of the circle, drawing closer to the altar at the center. Morgana, focused entirely on the swirling spirits, remained unaware of her approach. When she reached the altar, Sarah found Callum looking up at her with a mixture of hope and disbelief. You came, he whispered, his voice weak but determined. I knew you would. Always, Sarah promised, examining the silver cords that bound him. To her enhanced sight, they were clearly connected to Morgana by threads of dark energy, pulsing with each beat of the boy's heart. Hold still. This might hurt for a moment. Drawing on her awakened power, Sarah placed her hands over the boy's chest where the cursed threads gathered most densely. Blue light flowed from her palms, surrounding the malevolent energy, containing it just as she had done during the healing in the castle. But this time, instead of simply neutralizing the dark magic, she followed the threads back to their source, tracing the connection to Morgana herself. There, at the juncture where witch and curse met, Sarah focused all her power into a single, concentrated burst of energy. Savor. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The silver cords binding Callum disintegrated with a sound like shattering glass. The dark threads connecting him to Morgana snapped, the backlash of released energy striking the witch like a physical blow. Morgana screamed, a sound of rage and pain that seemed to come from the earth itself. She staggered, momentarily weakened, her attention jerking toward the altar. "You," she snarled, recognizing Sarah even through her magical shielding. "The last Mackenzie. How fitting that you should witness the culmination of my vengeance." Sarah helped Callum sit up, keeping herself between the boy and the enraged witch. "Your vengeance ends tonight, Morgana. The curse is broken." The Fraser line continues. "Foolish child," Morgana laughed, the sound like breaking ice. "You've merely delayed the inevitable. The curse has weakened the boy beyond recovery. Even now, his wolf nature fails him. Without it, he is nothing but a human child. And humans are so very fragile." She began moving toward them, red energy gathering around her hands once more. "As are you, for all your newfound power." Callum clutched Sarah's arm, his small body trembling with effort as he tried to stand. "She's right," he whispered. "I can't feel my wolf anymore. She's taken it from me." The admission sent a wave of protective fury through Sarah. This child, this innocent, robbed of his birthright by a creature consumed with ancient hatred. It was unacceptable, unconscionable, and she would not allow it to stand. The talisman at her throat flared with renewed intensity, responding to her emotions. Knowledge flowed through her, ancient and certain. There was a way to save Callum, to restore what had been taken. The same way that Rhiannon had saved Bran at the dawn of their shared history. But the price was high, possibly the ultimate price. "Stay behind me," Sarah told Callum, helping him move to the relative shelter of a large standing stone. "Whatever happens, don't intervene. Promise me." The boy nodded solemnly, his golden eyes huge in his pale face. "I promise. But Sarah, she's too strong. Even father couldn't defeat her." "I'm not your father," Sarah replied with a confidence that she didn't entirely feel. "I'm something Morgana hasn't faced in a very long time. A fully awakened seer of the Mackenzie bloodline." Squaring her shoulders, Sarah stepped away from the sheltering stone to face Morgana directly. The spectral figures of her ancestors continued their swirling dance around the perimeter. But their light had dimmed, their energy fading without the direct connection to the talisman that now fueled Sarah's stand. "You are nothing," Morgana hissed, gathering her power for a killing strike. "A nurse from Boston playing at ancient magic you can barely comprehend." "I am Sarah Mackenzie," she replied, her voice steady and carrying. "Daughter of Margaret, descendant of Rhiannon. I have walked the path of visions and emerged with truth, and I say your time is ended, creature of shadow." Before Morgana could release her gathered power, Sarah thrust her hand forward, palm out. Blue energy shot from her fingers in a concentrated beam, striking the witch square in the chest. Morgana staggered backward, her attack disrupted, but quickly recovered. She retaliated with a bolt of crimson force that Sarah barely deflected with a hastily raised shield of blue light. The two women circled each other within the stone ring, exchanging blasts of power that illuminated the clearing with alternating flashes of blue and red. Sarah was holding her own, but she could feel her reserves of energy depleting rapidly. She was new to these abilities, her endurance untested, while Morgana had millennia of experience to draw upon. "You cannot win," the witch taunted, sensing Sarah's fatigue. "Your bloodline is diluted by generations of ignorance." "Mine has been concentrated through centuries of focused hatred." A blast of crimson energy caught Sarah on the shoulder, spinning her around and dropping her to one knee. Pain lanced through her body, but she forced herself back to her feet, the talisman at her throat pulsing encouragingly. "You're right about one thing," Sarah acknowledged, her breath coming in short gasps. "I can't defeat you with power alone. But power isn't the only weapon at my disposal." Morgana laughed derisively. "What else do you have, little seer? Love? Compassion? Those are weaknesses, not strengths." "Knowledge," Sarah corrected, circling to position herself between Morgana and where Callum hid. "The path showed me who you really are, what you really want." "You know nothing of what I want," the witch snarled, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her pale eyes. "You want what was taken from you 3,000 years ago," Sarah continued, her voice gentler now despite the tension of their standoff. Your mate, the wolf who rejected you when your magic turned dark. Everything since has been vengeance for that loss. Morgana's face contorted with ancient grief and rage. He was mine, bound to me before all the witnesses of both our kinds. But when I sought greater power to protect our union, he turned from me in disgust, called me abomination, monstrous. So you became what he feared, Sarah concluded sadly, proving him right with every act of vengeance against his bloodline, becoming the monster he accused you of being. Be silent, Morgana screamed, hurling another blast of power that Sarah barely deflected. You cannot understand what was taken from me. I understand loss, Sarah countered, thinking of Michael, of the life they had planned together, cut short by cancer's implacable progression. I understand grief, but I also understand that destroying others won't heal what's broken inside you. It only breaks you further. For a moment, something almost human flickered across Morgana's ancient features, a glimpse of the woman she had been before hatred consumed her. But it passed quickly, replaced by renewed determination. Pretty words, she sneered, but ultimately meaningless. The Fraser line ends tonight, with or without the ritual I had planned. The boy's wolf nature is already fading. By dawn, it will be gone completely, and with it, any chance of the bloodline's continuation. Sarah knew it was true. She could sense Callum's weakening presence behind her, the unique energy that marked him as wolf-kind, diminishing with each passing moment. Soon it would be extinguished entirely, the curse completing its work even without the ritual sacrifice Morgana had intended. There was only one way to save him. The knowledge that had come to her on the path, the ancient magic that Rhiannon had used to save Bran. A transfer of essence, wolf to seer, seer to wolf. A balancing of energies that would restore what had been taken. But it required a conduit, a vessel strong enough to channel the power without being destroyed in the process. Her own life would be the price. Not just her humanity, but possibly her very existence. Sarah took a deep breath, centering herself for what was to come. The talisman pulsed against her skin, warm and encouraging, as if confirming her decision. You're right about the boy, she admitted to Morgana, lowering her hands in apparent surrender. His wolf nature is fading, but you've overlooked something crucial about the curse you created. Morgana paused, suspicion warring with curiosity in her pale eyes. What are you babbling about? The curse specifically targets pure-blooded Fraser wolves, Sarah explained, taking a careful step toward the altar stone at the center of the circle. It has no power over those of mixed heritage. The boy is the last pure blood, Morgana snapped impatiently. There are no others. Sarah smiled sadly. There is one other Fraser in this clearing. One whose wolf nature is untouched by your curse because it has lain dormant for generations. Hidden in the Mackenzie bloodline since my grandmother fled with Duncan's child in her womb. Understanding dawned in Morgana's ancient eyes, quickly followed by alarm. No, she breathed. You wouldn't. You couldn't. The ritual requires willing sacrifice, Sarah finished for her. I know. I saw it on the path. She moved quickly now, closing the distance to the altar stone. And I make that sacrifice freely, to save Callum, to break your curse once and for all. Before Morgana could react, Sarah leaped onto the altar stone, her feet landing precisely where Callum had lain moments before. The stone hummed with power beneath her, recognizing the ritual that was about to take place, even if it was not the one Morgana had intended. The spectral figures of Sarah's ancestors grew brighter around the perimeter, their energy focusing inward toward the center of the circle. Callum, Sarah called, her voice strong and clear despite her fear. Come to me, quickly. The boy emerged from behind the standing stone, his face pale but determined. Without hesitation, he ran to the altar, evading Morgana's grasping hands as she lunged to intercept him. Sarah reached down and lifted him onto the stone beside her, placing her hands on either side of his small face. This will feel strange, she warned him gently. But trust me, I'm going to make you whole again. Stop this! Morgana shrieked, gathering her power for a devastating attack. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, Sarah replied calmly. What Rhiannon did for Bran. What should have been done generations ago to maintain the balance between our bloodlines. The talisman at her throat flared with blinding blue light, lifting from her skin to hover in the air between her and Callum. Sarah placed one hand on the glowing pendant, drawing its ancient power into herself. With her other hand, she reached for Callum's chest, placing her palm directly over his heart. With willing heart, I give what is mine, she intoned, the words coming to her from some ancestral memory deeper than conscious thought. Wolf to seer, seer to wolf. Balance restored, harmony renewed. Blue light flowed from her hand into Callum's chest, seeking the fading ember of his wolf nature. At the same time, a golden energy began to stream from the boy into Sarah, the essence of the wolf entering her human form. The exchange was painful beyond description, every cell in her body screaming as it reconfigured to accommodate a nature it was never designed to hold. But she didn't falter, didn't break the connection even as Morgana hurled blast after blast of crimson energy against the shield of blue light that had formed around the altar stone. The spectral figures of her ancestors grew brighter and more solid as the ritual progressed, their combined energy reinforcing the shield, protecting Sarah and Callum during the critical transformation. Margaret's spirit stood closest to the altar, her ghostly features set in determined concentration as she helped channel the ancient magic. Within Sarah's body, changes were occurring at the cellular level, bones shifting subtly to accommodate potential transformation, muscles reconfiguring for greater strength and flexibility, senses sharpening beyond human limits. And with these physical changes came others more profound. An awakening of instincts dormant since birth, a connection to the natural world deeper than anything she had ever experienced, a sense of belonging to something ancient and powerful and right. In Callum, the changes were equally dramatic but differently focused. The fading spark of his wolf nature flared back to full strength, but now balanced by the seer gift flowing from Sarah into him. His golden eyes took on flecks of green, the colors swirling and merging as the two bloodlines rebalanced within his small body. No, Morgana screamed, redoubling her assault on the protective shield. 3,000 years of vengeance. You cannot undo it with a single act. But the witch's power was faltering against the combined force of generations of Mackenzie seers. The shield held firm, the ritual continuing uninterrupted, until at last, with a final surge of energy that lit the entire clearing like daylight, it was complete. The blue light receded, drawing back into Sarah and Callum, leaving them changed in ways both visible and hidden. Sarah straightened slowly, her movements fluid with a new grace that hadn't been there before. Her eyes, when she opened them, were no longer purely green but swirled with gold, the colors merging and separating in continuous motion. Beside her, Callum stood tall and straight, his previous weakness gone, his golden eyes similarly flecked with green. The boy's expression was one of wonder as he flexed his small hands, feeling the renewed strength flowing through them. "What have you done?" Morgana whispered, backing away as Sarah and Callum stepped down from the altar, stone in perfect unison. "Exactly what I said I would do," Sarah replied, her voice carrying new harmonics, a hint of the wolf's growl underlying her human speech. "I've broken your curse, restored balance between the bloodlines, created something new from something ancient." "Impossible," the witch hissed, though the evidence stood before her. The boy was dying. The curse was working. "The curse targeted pure-blooded Frasers," Sarah corrected. "Callum is no longer purely Fraser. He carries the Mackenzie seer gift now, balanced with his wolf nature. As I carry the wolf, balanced with my seer abilities." She stepped closer to Morgana, who retreated further, genuine fear showing in her ancient eyes. "The vengeance you've nursed for 3 millennia is rendered meaningless in a single moment of willing sacrifice. That must be disappointing." "I will not be mocked by a newborn abomination," Morgana shrieked, gathering what remained of her power for one final, desperate attack. Before she could release it, a new presence entered the clearing. Connell Fraser emerged from the trees, his powerful form halfway between man and wolf, golden eyes blazing with righteous fury. Behind him came the rest of the pack, similarly transformed, moving with predatory grace as they encircled the stone ring. "The binding has broken," Connell announced, his voice deeper and rougher in this hybrid form. "Your spell could not hold once the curse began to fail, Morgana. Or should I call you by your true name? The one you abandoned 3,000 years ago when you turned from light to darkness. That name has no power over me anymore, the witch snarled, backing away as the wolves closed in. I shed it when your ancestor betrayed our union. He did not betray you, Sarah said quietly, the knowledge coming to her from the ancestral memories now flowing freely through her mind. You betrayed yourself, Brigid, when you chose power over love, vengeance over healing. The use of her original name seemed to physically strike Morgana, making her stagger as if under a blow. You know nothing, she whispered, but the conviction had gone from her voice. I know that even now redemption is possible, Sarah continued, her tone compassionate despite everything the witch had done. 3,000 years is a long time to carry such hatred. It must be exhausting. For a moment, something like longing flickered across Morgana's ancient features, a glimpse of the woman she had been before darkness claimed her. But it passed quickly, replaced by a mask of cold determination. I chose my path millennia ago, she said flatly. It is too late for another. Before anyone could stop her, Morgana raised her hands high above her head. The red crystal pendant at her throat flared with blinding light, drawing what appeared to be her very essence into itself. Her physical form began to waver, becoming transparent, insubstantial. This is not ended, her voice echoed as her body dissolved into mist. Some hatreds transcend even death. I will return when you have forgotten to fear me. With those ominous words, Morgana vanished completely. The red crystal pendant fell to the ground with a soft thud, its light extinguished, leaving only a smooth stone that might have been ordinary if not for the residual darkness that seemed to cling to it like an oily film. Connell approached it cautiously, using a cloth to pick it up without touching it directly. We will secure this where she cannot reclaim it, he said grimly, though I fear we have not seen the last of her. The wolves began to shift back to human form, their transformation smooth and controlled, unlike the painful process Sarah had witnessed in her visions. Connell was the last to complete the change, his powerful hybrid form resolving into the man she had come to know over the past day. But as he approached her, Sarah saw him with new eyes, understanding now what it meant to carry the wolf within. You found the truth on the path, he said, his golden eyes taking in her transformed appearance, and made a choice I would never have asked of you. Not asked, Sarah agreed, feeling new strength and vitality flowing through her changed body. Freely given, for Callum, for the pack. She met his gaze steadily. For us. Callum moved to stand between them, reaching for both their hands with unconscious symbolism. Sarah saved me, he told his father proudly. She gave me some of her seer power, and now I can see things I couldn't before. His eyes, golden with green flecks, were bright with excitement. And she took some of my wolf. We shared, like you always tell me to do. Connell's expression softened as he looked down at his son, then back to Sarah. You have done what no one has done since Rhiannon and Bran, created true balance between our bloodlines. His voice dropped lower, meant for her ears alone. Do you understand what this means? Sarah nodded, the knowledge clear in her mind from both the path and her newly awakened ancestral memories. It means the mate bond can now be completed, wolf to wolf, seer to seer, as it was meant to be from the beginning. The pack had gathered around them now, their expressions ranging from awe to cautious respect as they regarded Sarah in her transformed state. Duncan pushed to the front, his weathered face alight with wonder as he studied her. Margaret's granddaughter, he said softly. You have her eyes, her courage. He bowed his head slightly. And now you have the wolf as well. The circle completes at last. Rona approached next, her usual reserve softened by genuine emotion. The pack owes you a debt that can never be repaid, she said formally. You have saved our future. Her gaze shifted to Callum, noting the changes in him with approval, and given us a new kind of alpha to lead us into that future. One by one, the pack members acknowledged Sarah, no longer as an outsider to be evaluated, but as one of their own who had proven herself in the most dramatic way possible. Even Eileen, standing at the back of the group, gave a reluctant nod of respect, her previous hostility tempered by what she had witnessed. As the group began to move back toward the castle, Connell kept Sarah and Callum close beside him, one strong arm around each of them, in a protective gesture that felt simultaneously new and deeply familiar. The three of them moved together with a synchronicity that went beyond conscious coordination, as if their very essences had aligned into a single harmonious unit. The transformation will continue to settle over the coming days, Connell explained quietly as they walked. Your first shift may come at the next full moon, or sooner if strong emotion triggers it. The balance you've created with Callum will help stabilize the process for both of you. Sarah nodded, feeling the wolf stir within her at his words, not with fear or strangeness, but with a sense of rightness. This new dual nature felt not like an invasion, but like the completion of something that had always been meant to be. And the seer abilities? Will they continue as well? Strengthened, if anything, Connell confirmed. The wolf nature enhances rather than diminishes the sight. You'll need training to control both aspects fully, but there is time for that now. His voice softened. Time for many things. The implications hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. What had begun with a chance encounter beside a Scottish loch had culminated in a transformation more profound than Sarah could have imagined when she first came to Scotland, seeking peace and connection to her roots. She had found those things, but in ways that transcended her human understanding. She had found a new family, a new purpose, a new self that somehow felt more authentic than the one she had lived with for 45 years. As the castle came into view, silhouetted against the night sky, Sarah felt the past and future converge within her transformed consciousness. Images flowed through her mind like a gentle stream. Herself and Connell standing side by side on the castle ramparts, watching over their pack. Callum growing into a young man of extraordinary gifts, leading with wisdom beyond his years. New children with golden green eyes, carrying the perfectly balanced bloodlines into future generations. The pack flourishing, expanding, creating a haven for both wolfkind and those with the sight. You're seeing it, aren't you? Connell asked softly, noticing her distant expression. The future that might be. One possible future, Sarah corrected, the seer wisdom flowing naturally now. The path showed me many, but this one, she smiled, a slow, satisfied expression that held both human intelligence and wolf certainty. This one feels right. As they crossed the threshold into Fraser Castle, Sarah Mackenzie stepped not just into an ancient building, but into a new life, one she had chosen freely, with open eyes and full heart. The transformation was not yet complete, the journey only beginning. But for the first time since Michael's death had sent her seeking across the ocean, she felt truly, completely alive. The wolf within her raised its head and howled in silent joy. The seer within her looked to the future with clear vision. And the woman at the center of it all, neither fully human nor completely wolf, but something new and powerful and necessary, took her place beside the alpha with the absolute certainty that she had found her home.